Hi, I'm Jennifer Sendro. I'm the producer of Werk It. Yay. Cool. If you can hear me speaking and you are in the lobby, fill that coffee cup right on that button and get in here, because we're starting. How are you? You're so awake. I totally don't feel that yet. I need an IV of coffee, but I will get there. If you want to, maybe you guys are the bad kids sitting in the back, and that's totally cool, but if you want to move down and move in, when they're picking people for the game show portion later, it'll be better if they can see you. So if you want to come down and fill in the seats. There's still people lined up outside, so I know as we start, there's going to be a lot of more people filling in as well. So, hopefully that won't be too disruptive, the check-in line. It proceeds apace. Did you all get tote bags? They're cute, right? Super cute. Anyway, I'm digressing. I'm here to introduce our first speaker so we can get started. I'm just gonna do that. So I'm introducing you to one of the women who makes New York Public Radio a place where Werk It can grow and thrive. Depelsha McGruder is our interim CEO. And do you guys know what New York Public Radio is? You kind of know? Wow, I'm impressed. That's cool. I work there, and sometimes I'm like, wow, there's so many things in this bucket. I'm going to tell you about it. It's the parent company of not just Werk It and nonprofit podcast producer WNYC Studios, but also WNYC Radio, Gothamist, classical radio station WQXR. We're all one big happy family. Depelsha oversees the work of an incredibly complex, mission-driven public media company. In addition to our digital and strategic planning processes, our efforts to expand WNYC's local news operation, and perhaps most important for this group, our efforts to incubate a diverse cohort of new voices in podcasting. So before joining New York Public Radio, Depelsha spent nearly 2 decades in leadership roles in the television industry, and she started her career as a broadcast journalist before that. She's the founder and president of Moms of Black Boys United, an organization dedicated to improving the perception and treatment of Black boys and men by society and law enforcement. So that's her resume. It's very impressive, but you should also know that she is an inspiring, generous person. She's a passionate advocate for true diversity, someone who really shows up to support the work that we do on the ground. She's just an all-around badass leader with a door that is always wide open. So I hope you'll get to meet her over the course of the next 2 days. You're gonna find out a little bit more about her now. Please give a really warm Werk It welcome to Depelsha McGruder.
Hello, how's everyone doing? Great. Thank you so much for the warm intro, Jennifer. That was so nice. And thank you also for all of the hard work you put into putting this together. So good morning, everyone. As Jennifer said, I'm Depelsha McGruder, interim CEO of New York Public Radio, at least for the next 6 days, because in 6 days we welcome our incoming president and CEO, Gateley Sheikhoslami. So we're very excited about that. It's a new chapter in New York Public Radio's history. Gateley joins us from Chicago Public Media, which some of you know as WBEZ, and I couldn't be more excited to begin our next chapter with another inspiring woman leader. So I'm delighted to see so many of you out here this early for the opening session. That's great. But I know you're eager, just like I am, to soak up this experience and dig into the fabulous and packed program we've got lined up. I want to start by thanking our generous funders, Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the Annenberg Foundation, and our sponsors, Luminary, Spotify, Spreaker, ACAST, Himalaya, and the Women's Foundation of California. Let's thank them for their support. CPB and CEO Pat Harrison in particular helped dream up this incredible festival, and they provided leadership support ever since. I also want to give a special shout out to the team at WNYC Studios who worked so tirelessly all year long to put this together and make it possible. Jennifer Sendro, who you just met, Denise Bennett, Yasemin Khorsandi, and the many colleagues here today and back in New York who have dedicated their time and energy. Big kudos and tremendous thanks to all of you. So I could not begin to list the phenomenal talent we have leading our panels and presentations here for this conference, but some of the names that jump out are Roxane Gay. She actually keynoted the inaugural Werk It way back in 2015 before she even had a podcast of her own. Brittany Luce, co-host of The Nod. She first came to Werk It as a participant right as her career was taking off. And my colleague, the wonderful Kerri Hoffman, CEO of PRX. She's doing such important work across the industry, training, advancing, and supporting diverse storytellers and producers. So, they put me up here to welcome you, set the stage, and explain a bit about what we're here to do. First, a few key facts. #facts. Werk is 5 years old, and we've had more than 6,000 participants to date. This year's group is gathered from 30 states and 10 countries. Can you believe that? That's amazing. We've connected more than 500 people with mentors, and more than 90% of past attendees say they made new industry contacts. 27% said they got job leads. Just yesterday, 100 people moved through our podcast boot camp here in LA, hosted in partnership with Second Home. And this past year, we leveraged our community to create a pay transparency tool that helps podcasters demand fair pay. It's on the Werk It website, and I encourage you to check that out. Good information there. So those stats are important, but they're only part of the picture. As we all know, the best way into any explanation is through narrative, through story, through the personal. So this morning, I'm going to share a little bit of my story, the journey that led me here today, and which has over and over shown me the critical importance of spaces like this. So as Jennifer said, I started my career as a local TV journalist because I love telling stories, holding those in power accountable, and giving voice to those who would not otherwise have a platform to speak. After a while, I made the somewhat unusual request for my news director to move me from my place in front of the camera to a spot as a producer behind it. This is because I learned very early on that it matters a lot who gets to decide what stories are told and how they're told. I realized that I personally could have more impact behind the scenes. And so from then on, I've shifted my focus to supporting diverse storytellers and creating platforms to ensure their success, which I did for many years at MTV and BET before coming here. We need these platforms and these spaces like Werk It. But that's my journey, my decision, my path that I took to do my best, most meaningful work. And all of you, of course, have your own path as storytellers, producers, researchers, marketers, managers, and so on. One unique aspect of my personality, I think, is that for whatever reason, for as long as I can remember, I haven't internalized the anxieties of others, their discomfort, their racism, their sexism, their whatever. To me, all of it is their problem, not mine. If they're uncomfortable with my presence in a room, they're more than welcome to leave it. Okay? And sometimes they do. So, one example, we can get the picture up. So, the quite literal crowning achievement of my high school career was my coronation as Miss Shamrock High School. Here's the photo, it's a little blurry, it's very old. You can see in the back the theme was the Roaring Twenties. That was the theme of the pageant. Now, before you get too impressed, I should share that my stiffest competition was a girl who brought the house down with a rousing patriotic medley on the handbells. That's true. But nonetheless, it was a big day for me. You see, Shamrock High School was a majority white school in the suburbs of Atlanta, and I was the first Black Miss Shamrock High in 1990. In 1990. So upon my coronation, about a third of the white parents walked out, just like that, most of the ones sitting right in the front. So what did I do? I walked my 17-year-old Howard University-bound self down the hallway where they were all standing, looked directly into their steaming, mad eyes, smiled hard, gave my best pageant wave, and delighted in wearing that crown. I was not going to let them take that moment from me, no matter how much they wanted to, and neither will you. Now, of course, I'm not saying it's been easy. We can get rid of that. We can go back to the main screen. So I'm not saying it's been easy or that the barriers we face in this room on our own journeys as women and people of color and queer and transgender and non-binary people, that they're not very, very real, because they are. Okay, one last bit about me. My name is Depelsha McGruder. Now, I know I already introduced myself, but I'm very used to saying my name multiple times and answering questions about it. When I introduce myself, people often say something along the lines of, "Oh, that's unique." And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with that? Is that a compliment? Is that an insult? I don't know what that means, right? But along the way, I've become very good at talking about my name. When people ask me what it means, I explain that my mom was a French major who loved the word dépêcher, which means to hurry, as in dépêchez-vous, dépêche mode. So you take a little French, mix it with a little Black creativity, and voila, here I am. The story is actually true, and it keeps things moving. But if I'm being honest, I would rather not have to talk about my name as often as I do. So I know it's early, but if you will, please indulge me in a little crowd participation. I can see you, it's kind of dark, but I hope I can see the hands. How many of you have ever been asked about your name? Raise your hand if you don't mind. Wow, a lot of people. Okay. How many of you have ever been asked or encouraged to plan an office party, order a cake, pick up a birthday card when that has nothing to do with your job description? Wow, that's a lot of people, okay. How many of you have ever seen a fabulous job listing that you didn't apply to because you didn't think you were 100% qualified? Wow, and then you hear about some dude who applied and got the job after just like 2 years in a pretty good internship somewhere, right? It's true. Last one. How many of you ever made a contribution in a meeting to a silent room only to hear a man 5 minutes later make the most brilliant and profound observation of his entire career, which of course is the thing you just said that nobody listened to? We've all been through that, right? So none of this is news to us, but whether or not we succumb to it, we've all felt the pressure, the expectation that we need to explain ourselves, to justify our presence in the spaces we work, to prove that we are brilliant and creative and excellent and that we deserve to be there. And to do all of this on top of the work itself, the work of being brilliant and being creative and excellent, the work we're here to do. This is why we need Werk It. To cultivate, to carve out a deliberate space where we don't have to do that other kind of work. A space that assumes up front that women, non-binary people, queer people, people of color, that we are brilliant, we are creative, and we are excellent. A space where we can talk shop, where we can give and receive mentorship, and a space where we can develop the network, support, and community we need to tell our own stories in our own words and in our own terms. Can I get an amen for that? Thank you. So I want to thank you all once again for coming out and sharing your brilliance with us. We really appreciate it. I am so thrilled to be here, and I can't wait to meet more of you later. And remember, if anyone ever tries to take your crown, just pivot, smile, and keep shining. Thank you. So I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker, Kathy Merritt. Kathy is the Senior Vice President for Journalism and Radio at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, where she leads CPB's broad efforts to advance the public media ecosystem, and especially our capacity to produce meaningful news reporting our communities urgently need. She has received numerous honors for her years of service and excellence, including the Society for Professional Journalists National Award for Public Service in Broadcasting. She's held leadership roles at some of the nation's most influential public radio organizations, including PRI and WAMU, and has also been on the ground as a producer, editor, host, and reporter in public and commercial radio. Please join me in welcoming Kathy Merritt. Thank you.
Depelsha, McGruder, everybody. Amazing, just amazing. Good morning. Jennifer said this was a sassy crowd. So that's a good thing. It's great to be back in LA and back at Werk It. And you know, like Depelsha, I did start out as a journalist. And when I was a young reporter in public radio, I would have loved to have had this kind of conference to attend. You know, it could get a little lonely, a little isolating working in a small public radio newsroom. And I longed for this kind of a group where I could come and meet people like me doing the work that I was doing. And really to figure out too, was I on the right track? You know, some kind of affirmation. So that's part of what I've always loved about this conference and why I'm very proud that CPB has been a sponsor of Werk It from the very beginning. For a couple of days, we, women, all of us here get to create a space where competition gets set aside. You know, we get to pull back the curtain on what we do and what we know. And a lot of people here, like Depelsha leading the way, kind of we pull back the curtain on ourselves a little bit too, to talk about the challenges we face and to laugh about all the crazy things that happen in life, and also to share our dreams and aspirations about what we do. So after 5 years of this conference in New York and in LA, I mean, I'm amazed to hear Depelsha say 6,000 women have attended Werk It. That's amazing. So now there's this group of Werk It women who are connected with each other and helping shape the world of podcasting. So let's pause on that thought for a minute. You might not feel like you're shaping the world of podcasting. A lot of times you probably just feel like you're getting up and slogging through the daily grind, but you know, podcasting is still in early days. It's got a lot of room to grow. The audience is big. Half of Americans now, 144 million people, have listened to a podcast. But you know what that means? Half of Americans have not listened to a podcast. So there's great opportunity ahead. So how can you help shape this environment, this landscape of on-demand audio? By being you, by being your best, most authentic self, and bringing your values to your work. So I want to talk about values a little bit. Seems like a very old-fashioned kind of word, right? Values, especially in this podcasting Wild West, where there really doesn't seem to be a lot of rules. Do values really matter? Yes, I think so, absolutely. You know, I'm not sure we realize how much our values shape who we are as people and what we bring to the table. And since Depelsha got personal, I'll get a little personal, although there will be no pictures of me in high school. I'm just saying. I looked exactly like this. You know, as I've gotten older, I've come to understand the things that really have driven me in my life. For example, from an early age, probably literally from the time I could walk, I knew I was going to college because my parents never had that opportunity. So they made it clear to me and my brothers that, boy, education was important and college was mandatory. So I got my degree and then some, and I still value learning and education in my life. So my parents didn't have college degrees, but they were informed. They watched the TV news every night, so we watched the TV news every night. We read newspapers, we read magazines. My CPB colleague here, Erica Pulley-Hayes, hello, Erica. She was asking me, because she knows how old I am, if I remembered watching the Nixon impeachment hearings back in the 70s. I was pretty young then, I do remember them, but what I remember most was not the hearings, but my mom being riveted watching those hearings on TV because she wanted to know and understand what was going on. So that's really what sparked my interest in journalism, that understanding the value of knowing what's going on in the world. And I do come from a big family. I have 4 brothers. I'm the only girl. I'm right in the middle. So I gotta tell you, a sense of fairness has driven me throughout my life. When you have 4 brothers, wait a minute, he got 3 Oreo cookies. I only got 2 Oreo cookies. Fairness, very important to me. And respect for others. I mean, that was certainly infused in me by my parents. I grew up in the South, and part of showing respect, of course, was saying yes, ma'am, and yes, sir, to your elders. And I didn't do that one time. I was in the doctor's office seeing the pediatrician, right? And I gotta tell you, it didn't matter that I had pneumonia. When I got home, I hadn't said, yes, sir, I was in trouble. So that kind of respect is really important to me. These kind of personal values also translate into the public media values that many of us hold. They drive us to produce content that educates, informs, enlightens, inspires, and respects everyone. They make public media one of the most trusted places to go for news and information. They drive us to provide that information people need to be part of our democracy. And at CPB, our podcasting projects show what's important to us. For example, we've supported Civics 101, a great podcast from New Hampshire Public Radio that talks about how government works, but in a much more fun way than you learned in 5th grade. We've also funded Catapult, Project Catapult from PRX, and I know Kerri Hoffman is here. And that project shows public media stations how to make podcasts that really connect with their communities, because that's where content really is at its best, is connecting people. And of course, we funded New York Public Radio's Women's Voices initiatives and Work It for the past 5 years. So our goal is to support the content and the projects that make life better for all Americans, whether that's news programming or entertainment programming or digital games for kids. So what's your goal? What about your podcast? What are the values that drive the content that you're producing? Do you value inclusion? How about honesty, accuracy? Are you telling stories that lift people up? Are you giving voice to ideas that help us understand this crazy, complex world that we live in? Over these next 2 days, as you share stories with all the amazing women here, just listen carefully to what they say and listen to yourself. How do you describe yourself and the work you do? I think you'll hear the values that define who you are and what you do. It's your authenticity, your talent, and your values that are driving the future of podcasting. You hold the microphone. You have the power of the microphone. What's the mark that you want to make? Enjoy the conference. Thank you very much. Have a great time at Werk It.
Hello. I'm Jennifer again. You can see I'm working now because got my lanyard on and my fanny pack. There's so many more of you now. This is awesome. If you just came in, feel free to move down if you want to. If you don't want to hide in the shadows back there, it might be good. We're just doing a little stage transition right now. We're going to move a few things around for our next session. But I want to introduce you to the person that will be taking you through the rest of the day here on the main stage and also tomorrow. She is way more entertaining than I am, so this is going to be a blessing when she takes this microphone from me. She's a writer and a musician, and her name is Dessa.
What's up? Hey, good morning. Good morning. I know there's a bunch of other creatives in the room as well. And I was so impressed by how totally civil and pleasant everybody stayed in line. Like, all the way to that little break for the driveway, and then all the way to the Ace Hotel, and then all the way to the taco stand. I walked the whole line, and everybody was still really nice to each other. My name is Dessa. Thank you so much for the introduction, Jennifer. I work in hip-hop usually. I'm a singer and a rapper, and I've been really excited to be able to be part of this conference, in part, and festival, because I'm gonna be an eager note taker. I'm also new to podcasting, like I think a lot of people in the house are. And last night I was asleep in room 406 at the Ace Hotel, and I was nervous because I had to get up really early, a lot earlier than you do for rap shows. And I had a nightmare that I lost my lanyard. That's like a 2-game suspension for sure from any hip-hop stage. Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you for bringing your best selves to the line. I hope everybody got caffeinated. And we're now gonna start with one of the biggest collections of talent for a single event that Werk It has ever featured. Here, we're gonna begin the Future Now Summit. And to moderate it, I'm gonna ask you to help me welcome back to stage the COO of New York Public Radio, Depelsha McGruder.
Hot seat. So this is going to be fun. This year, the Werk It team decided to bring together 10 of the most powerful women in podcasting to have a conversation about all types of things that we're going to be talking about throughout the conference. So let's get started. When I call your name, please come out and take a seat. Jennifer Ferro, she's the president of KCRW Public Radio here in Los Angeles. Liz Gateley, she's the head of creative development for Spotify. Kerri Hoffman, CEO of PRX. Amanda Lund, co-founder of Earios. Kristen Muller, Chief Content Officer of Southern California Public Radio. Christa Scharfenberg is the CEO of the Center for Investigative Reporting. Tanya Salmonator is the Chief Content Officer at Crooked Media. Paula Schumann is the VP of News Show Development for WNYC Studios. Julia Turner is the Deputy Managing Editor at the LA Times, overseeing audio projects there. Yeah, I don't know. It's a complicated seating arrangement we have here. And Jenna Weiss-Berman is the co-founder of Pineapple Street Media. Right here. So the first question, you think we have enough people? Anybody from the audience want to come join the panel? No kidding. So as I said, this is I would describe this as a sneak peek. We only have an hour and we have like a powerhouse lineup. So this is a sneak peek of some of the topics we're going to cover throughout the festival, just to give you a little snack. So we won't be able to go too in depth, but we'll get through as much as we can. Think of a very expensive snack. This is like, with all these people, it's like caviar in the morning, right? So there are 10 of you, we only have an hour, and I'm gonna focus on 5 big questions, covering what you're making, who you're making it for, how you work, and of course, how you're paying for it. Very important. So first up, the most important thing, the content itself, programming. I wanna talk to you about what type of shows get a green light from you these days. Are you placing your bets on acquisitions, original content, celebrity-based? There's a stat that says that 48% of the top 25 most downloaded shows are hosted by celebrities, which is really interesting. So I want to start with Liz. And I have to say, I was at MTV at the same time when Liz was head of development. In my opinion, she reigned over the golden age of MTV. My favorite MTV shows ever were Laguna Beach and The Hills, any Laguna Beach and The Hills fans, and she did that. So I think it's a good place to start because those were unknown, people, you groomed talent. But now that you're in this new role at Spotify, how are you thinking about the choices you make for content and balancing all of these things?
Sure, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. That's a fun question because we are investing a lot in original podcasts at Spotify. We look for obviously something that appeals to our audience, and we serve Gen Z and millennials. So we look at that first. Is it culturally relevant to them? And is there talent or an event-like story at the center? So talent doesn't need to be known talent. We have invested in Higher Ground and the Obamas, and as well as people like Kevin Bacon, but our #1 podcasts in Mexico are 2 women that just talk about relevant cultural questions of life. So I think it's exciting to see how quickly we're expanding globally, but it's really about trying to find innovative formats as well. Parcast just launched the Daily Horoscope, and we just launched something with Bill Simmons called The Hottest Take, which is 7 minutes every day. So we're trying to innovate. But people follow people in this space, so I think we're excited about what we can do to innovate and find those same type of talent that are out there just waiting to be discovered.
So it sounds like quite a mix. I would bet on the Obamas doing pretty well. I don't know. Tanya, what about you? How are you thinking about this at Crooked Media? I know you have more of a specific lens in terms of the type of content you do.
Yeah,
but how do you make
true.
Choices?
We at Crooked Media would also bet on the Obamas. So good for you. Can't wait to compete. I think it's true. Crooked Media has a pretty specific lens about the kind of content we pursue, but we try to broaden we are a political media company, but we try to broaden what political means. There aren't a lot of huge celebrities in the political space, and in fact, I think a lot of people like it that way, but so we rely a lot on the compelling stories in the space that people might not have heard, or chemistry between hosts, chemistry, or just passion for the topic that you're talking about can often overcome a lot of what you think people are looking for. That's what's so great about the podcasting medium. I think people are looking for a compelling story, especially about something they don't know about. And that's not always true in other mediums. Like, they do follow people that they know. So we've been really fortunate to find people who match our mission at Crooked Media, which is to take on heavy topics or take on political issues, but do it with a sense of humor and hope, or at least dedication to figuring out what people can do about it, even if that's just educating yourself. So, for example, we have our biggest podcast is Pod Save America, and before Pod Save America, nobody really knew who Jon Favreau, John Lovett, and Tommy Vitor and Dan Pfeiffer were. There are a lot of people who still don't know who they are, but in the podcasting space, they found their chemistry and their approach to politics was really compelling to a lot of people. At the same time, we also got into docuseries and found an activist and a journalist who was working in Oklahoma for her tribe. She's a member of the Cherokee Nation, and she had been telling this story over and over and over again about how the loss of land for Native Americans and how the US history's relationship to that. And we found it really compelling. I found her story, she had written an op-ed, and I found it on Twitter. And I was like, this is an incredibly compelling story. And why don't we let the people whose history this is tell it? And it ended up being, that podcast is This Land, subscribe now. And it ended up being a really compelling story, and nobody knew who she was, but now she gets a platform to tell that history that's really personal, and she's really passionate about it, and her chemistry around that story is really what sells it. So that's what we look for.
Great. Paula, without giving away any strategic secrets, how are you thinking about this for WNYC Studios? And Paula is has a new title. It's always been a part of her job, but she is the head of new show development for WNYC, so she's the person to pitch your podcast to. But go ahead.
I was going to say, what are we now? I would say we're building on the sort of original DNA of WNYC, and we're mission-driven, journalistic, public media organization, and so we're looking for shows that are a natural extension of what we do best, and so that's reported pieces, it's journalism, conversations, and stories that matter. It's always interesting to hear the trends about celebrity-driven podcasts, because that's not what we're doing. And it's not to say that we would never work with a celebrity necessarily, but we do tend to work with people who have stories to tell and particular kinds of chemistry as well. And then oftentimes that becomes their platform, and then they become household names. And so that's basically what we're focusing on. I think, I'm also super interested in people who are doing something a little bit different than their natural, what they do in their daily lives. We have our first podcast coming out, which is a memoir, essentially. It's an audio memoir coming out later this month. And it's something that we developed with one of our first Two Dope Queens stars. He was on one of the early, I think in the second season, his name is Chris Garcia, and he had a really interesting story to tell about his father. So there will be things it's funny, it's about his dead father, but yet it is funny, but it's not a comedy, and it's not stand-up comedy, and it's pushing him in a new direction that he hasn't necessarily done before. So it sort of takes our strengths as storytellers and brings it to people who have stories to tell but haven't necessarily done that directly, intentionally in their own artistic lives. And meanwhile, we're building on the strengths of our own newsroom, working with some of our investigative reporters on stories that we feel we can bring to life in, like I said, docuseries as well. And also continuing to look at sort of the weird and wacky. We did a show with 5-minute episodes earlier this year called 10 Things That Scare Me, which was very different and was sort of just short episodes, non-narrated pieces, and also allowed us to bring a huge variety of voices to one single show. We had 101 episodes and 101 different people talking about their fears. So we continue to really focus on different voices and giving them platforms to speak. And then through that, we can develop new shows and new offshoots with them. We're already working with some of the people who've been on that show as well.
Thank you. And Christa, what about you?
Yeah, so the Center for Investigative Reporting is a fairly small nonprofit, and Reveal, our radio show and podcast, is an hour every week of deeply reported investigative reporting, which is incredibly expensive. So we are placing all of our bets on one show, really can't do anymore. But within that show, I think we're trying to be as experimental as we can and to try as many things as we can. One of the ways that we managed to pull this off, everyone in public media said we'd never be able to do a whole hour of investigative reporting every week. And so the magic of how we've done it is through tons and tons of collaboration. So about half of the stories come from our newsroom and half come through partnerships with other newsrooms and freelancers around the country and around the world. And that really helps us just kind of blow open, the potential for the show. It helps us with audience development and helps us bring new voices to the air. We care very much, especially for this kind of work, that the voices that you hear on the radio show are not sort of typical white men who have done investigative reporting traditionally. And so being able to go outside of our newsroom and develop new voices from other organizations around the country has been a big part of our model. And we're also, within our newsroom for 2020, we're in the process of developing 2 serialized stories that will be in the Reveal feed. So we don't really have the resources to do spin-off stories, so kind of within the format of the show, we're experimenting with other ways of telling stories over time next year. So 2 of those are coming in the first half of next year. And in terms of celebrities, we've invested in Al Letson as the host of the show, who likes to think of himself as a celebrity. I don't know. I think we're turning him into one.
Great, thank you. So now I want to shift to talking about the audience a little bit. If I'm reading this clock correctly, we're running about 2 minutes behind. I just want to keep you all in mind. So let's keep it moving. We're doing pretty good, but let's speed it up a little bit. So I want to talk about audience. So a few stats. The stats show that 22% of Americans are now listening to podcasts on a weekly basis. That's a lot of people. But there are more than 700,000 podcasts available, 29 million episodes in 2019. So that's a lot of stuff to choose from, right? So I want to ask you, how are we solving? I'm going to start with Kristen. How are we solving the discovery problem? And how do you think about audience when you're making stuff? How do you think about who you're trying to reach? Audience segmentation, acquisition. How much do you leverage, your main radio platform to attract audiences? Are you going after new audiences? Just where does the audience fit into your calculation of what you're doing?
So I will just say we were all in the green room before, and I think this was the question everyone was hoping they wouldn't get. Because we're all like, I don't know, who knows? I mean, God, why would we know that? Discovery, it's like in the Stone Ages, right? It's still like me calling my mom and saying, have you heard? And then, of course, just trying to find placement with like-minded shows and get some kind of trade going. In terms of using our broadcast signal to get audience, it is a great thing to have. Blasting out to tens of thousands of people that you've got a new show for people who are already, listened or accustomed to listening is great, but it's a different kind of listening. Like the radio listening is very different than podcast listening, and I don't know that there's any data to support that a big radio promotion contributes to downloads. It certainly helps build awareness and branding. I think for public media, this is a really fortuitous time for this conference. We launched a studio earlier this summer. It's called Earios Studios, and we're going to be investing heavily over the next 3 to 4 years in podcasts. And just yesterday, we had our first kind of little mini in-house upfront where we greenlit a bunch of projects. And all the projects really had to speak to several different criteria. One was the audience. Like, how does this project put us in a new place with the audience? And we're aiming, of course, for younger, diverse. And in LA, we're really trying to also double down, not just on the specificity of this place, but also who lives here. So for those of you who are new to LA, this is a majority minority city. 44% of residents are Latina or Latino. It's, really, we're home of the resistance. We are progressive, diverse, future-facing, and we want to embody that in the work, and that means including and providing a space for Latinx creators. So we are committing to 50% of our development over the next 2 years will be involve Latino host, producers, some kind of talent. And that's us committing to ourselves to get away from ourselves, really, in public media, which, as I'm finding, is incredibly hard to do. And my pod team out here is, I'm sure they're out there, and they know how hard it is for me to get away from myself. So, so that's the goal, and it's really hard to do.
Wow, I didn't realize how perfect you were to answer that question, but I actually got chills when you said that, because the thing when people talk about reaching new audiences and diversifying audiences, rarely will they take a bold, they won't usually put a stake in the ground like that's that clear and that bold. So I just applaud you all for doing that. That's amazing.
We haven't done it yet.
Well, but to say, I know.
I mean, but I'm saying it, this is like public accountability right here.
To say that's the aspiration, I think it's really bold.
That's the aspiration for sure.
And admirable. So I want to ask the same question to Julia. Where's Julia? How are you all thinking about this at the LA Times, and how much do you leverage, the paper versus going after whole new audiences?
Yeah, so I just joined the LA Times 9 months ago, and it's an incredible newsroom of investigative journalists, of columnists, of all kinds of skills and talents. And, with shows like Dirty John, we've had incredible luck with turning investigative reporting into really fascinating true crime narrative that helps illuminate really interesting stories. As I think about growing our audience here in Los Angeles, the paper is at this really interesting moment, and what you said really resonated, where the media entities in Los Angeles have not necessarily been produced by or really for the entirety of this city. And I think we see Los Angeles as our greatest strength, because the issues that are important here, the stories that are important here, the people that are doing the journalism and that we're doing the journalism for reflect where this country is headed and where the world is headed. So if we are authoritatively covering immigration, climate, Asia, Latin America, a more diverse American populace, who is enfranchised and disenfranchised by our current political structure, for example. Those are all issues that matter a lot here in Southern California, but they also matter everywhere. And I think we feel we have the opportunity to build a national news outlet by really focusing on the issues that matter here regionally. In terms of podcast discovery, I think the paper gives us license to produce work that helps people discover that podcasting exists, because we can do an entire special print section and say, hey, here's thousands of words and fascinating photographs that are a story, but if you want to experience the story in another format in a different way, maybe you should try this thing called podcasting. And we've seen significant pickup from both print and digital iterations of stories that we're also doing in audio. I also think I'm excited about cultivating talents within the newsroom and using podcasting to help build the relationship of people in the city with the newspaper. The LA Times has been through a lot over the last 20 years. You can Google it if you want to read all about it. But, I think we feel a real urgency around taking the opportunity we have with new ownership and new investment to be a resource for people who live here, for people who want to understand the issues here, and people around the country and the world who, by understanding the currents of this place, can understand everything. And I think bringing the talents within the newsroom to life is something that podcasting is really good at. It can create that intimate relationship with a broader institution that has a broader civic purpose. So in a way, the newspaper is marketing for podcasting, but also podcasts are marketing for the newspaper, and we're planning to work both of those angles.
That's great. Amanda, where's Amanda? How do you think about this? You
my
have
turn.
a very clear positioning in terms of who you're for.
Yeah.
So how do you think about audience segmentation and reaching that audience and breaking through the clutter?
So Earios is a woman-run network we just launched in July, and all of our podcasts are hosted by women. And I have to say, just real quick, if 5 years ago I could see myself on this panel, I would just go, dear God, what have I done? There's been a mistake. So this is very cool. But yeah, we say at Earios that our shows are by women, but they're for everyone. So we're not, when we're creating content, we're not sort of thinking, oh, what will women want to listen to? We're just trying to make shows that we like and hope that a lot of people will like. But that is something that, because we've only been out for a couple of months, that we're that's sort of our next hurdle, is to focus on, we have about 10 shows, just trying to build those shows out and get an audience for them. But I will say that I am a creative person and I've been podcasting for 10 years. And my co-founder, Maria, and we had a podcast, or we have one called The Big Ones. And did I hear a little whistle? Thank you. But anyway, and we were struggling with the same thing of building an audience for it and cutting through the noise. And I think there's like a number of downloads we were just plateauing at. And that's part of the reason, to be honest, why we created a network. We were like, oh, we can't really get this show on a network. We thought that support would really help us grow. And so we'll just create our own damn network. And turns out it's still a struggle, even when you have the resources. So I'm definitely taking in what all of these other women are saying about ways to sort of build that out.
That's wonderful. Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
And just one stat show you're in the, heading in the right direction. We have stats on new podcast listeners, like people who just started listening to podcasts in the last 6 months, and 53% of them are women.
Right.
So you have a ripe audience.
That's great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. So now I want to shift to talking about what makes all of this possible, which is money, and how we monetize podcasts, how we make a business of it. And how are you doing it currently? What are some other opportunities to monetize better? What's the next frontier? And I'd like to start with Jenna, who, when I told her I was going to ask her about monetization, was like, oh, I don't know. Meanwhile, she just sold a company that was created less than 3 years ago. To Intercom for an undisclosed amount of a lot of money. So I think you're doing okay on monetization, and I think you're the right person to start with. So I want you to talk about that journey. Like, was that intentional? Did you plan to create this asset that would one day be, acquired by someone else? And I also know before that you had a unique business model in which you were doing both creative projects and commercial projects. So just tell us how you have thought about monetization and what you're going to do with your newfound earnings.
Oh my God. So embarrassing. I do love money, it's true. Also, I'm so happy to be here. This is the only conference that I really love for podcasts, and I'm embarrassed that my feet don't totally touch the ground. But it's great to be here. Wow, this is weird. Okay, I'll just move up a little. Power pose. We did not set out to create something that was going to be valuable. I didn't even that's a terrible thing to say. I mean, it just wasn't the goal to sell a company in 3 years. And honestly, I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur, actually. We had so many people coming to us who were interesting, cool institutions and people like the New York Times and Hillary Clinton and asking how do we make a podcast? And we saw sort of a space in the industry for something that we could do, which was be a production house, which there were plenty of networks, but there weren't really companies that were doing high level production. And so we got off to a good start. We started with the New York Times, Hillary Clinton, Lena Dunham, and a bunch of brands. Controversial Women, actually, is who we were doing a lot of things for. But yeah, we definitely didn't mean to do this whole thing, and I'm excited about it, and it's been really fun. And mostly we have a wonderful staff who I think are happy, and that's very important to me. So, but in terms of monetization, I know a lot of people talk about podcast discoverability being so broken, and I actually think podcast sales are more broken than discoverability. It's still people are almost always selling ads based on these CPMs, and it's a lot of these sort of direct response things that don't bring in a ton of money unless you're doing really, unless you have a massive audience. I think I've heard that 1% of podcasts make money, and that's a bummer, I think. And so I would really like to see the industry move in a direction of finding sort of more presenting sponsors and doing exciting, interesting ads that are better than some of the things that we're hearing. And some people are already, Gimlet's doing a beautiful job at that. We're trying to do some of that.
But I think in terms of like the way that we look at monetization, and if you're a freelancer, I think that this really like also applies to whatever to like the way that you should be looking at money too, is like we try to balance things so that like we're doing a bunch of stuff for brands that's paying really well, and then we're using that money to make things like, the Janet Mock Show, which we did a few years ago, and to make things like The Clearing and Missing Richard Simmons. Those also did pretty well financially, so we got lucky on those in the end. But I think just like thinking about business in terms of like, these are the things that will make money, this is the art, and finding a combination that works and that keeps a business going. And it worked for us. Like we never took any venture capital or anything like that. We just kind of figured out a good balance, and I think that that's really possible right now. That's all I have to say.
That's an amazing story. That's more than enough. Thank you. Jennifer, how are you thinking about this at KCRW? I know you have lots of events, for example. Is that part of the monetization strategy, or when you think about monetizing podcasts?
Yeah, thinking about monetizing podcasts. Well, we try to look at it holistically. So we are a public radio station based here in Los Angeles. We are really focused on being a brand that represents, I don't want to say we're focused on being a brand, we're an organization that really focuses on reflecting Los Angeles. And that takes many forms, both podcast, digital content, in-person content, and over the air. So, we have not found the magic formula that means we can all go to Hawaii because we've made so much money on our podcasts. But if you look at podcasts as part of another way to serve an audience or a new audience that's coming in, and that allows you to stretch, that's the right way for us to look at it. I mean, we'd love for those things to be able to stand alone. We do a combination of originally created, kind of 8-episode series. We do weekly shows. Our most popular ones are our political shows right now, Left, Right, and Center, and All the President's Lawyers. Those have really very engaged audiences, as you can imagine at this time that we find ourselves in. And then we have other shows like Good Food, which has this devoted following of people who are totally into food. And then we have a pie contest every year that brings out 5,000 people that people bake like 400 different pies, and we have celebrity judges, and it's just a big community experience. So when we look at it holistically, all of this makes sense. If we were gonna start out and just okay, all of our fortunes are gonna be focused on podcasts, we'd be really poor. But I think we're all trying to figure it out. I feel like we're in this kind of this ebb and flow of this environment where there's, like when blogs first started, everybody had a blog, everybody has a podcast. And it's like, how do you stand out and get noticed? And I think we're approaching a period of consolidation in some point in the next 5 years. And there's a lot of money floating around in this space that's going to purchasing things and stuff like that. But, I don't know, there's people you can talk to in this industry who have millions and millions and millions of downloads, and they haven't really made any significant money off of that through ad sales. So I don't know, I'm interested to see how it goes. I mean, we have the luxury of having a large community of people that really care about what we do. And so we're just trying to serve that community.
Thank you. And Kerri, how is PRX thinking about this? You've been very innovative in your approaches to business models and creating a whole separate brand for your podcast studio.
I actually spend my day and most of my nights thinking and worrying about money. So I have I've been sitting here listening and thinking a lot about our approach. And just to pick up some threads that you've heard here this morning, podcasting actually is a very entrepreneurial endeavor. And so just by show of hands, how many people in the audience consider yourselves to work for yourself? It's a lot. So you worry about money too. And as the industry grows, there's greater and greater consolidation. And there will be a day when individuals who used to be able to knock on the door of agencies to sell their podcasts, they won't talk to individuals anymore because that's what consolidation does. There's been about a $1.2, $1.3 billion worth of investment in the podcast industry in the last 2 years. That's largely fueling acquisitions and ad tech and all of this kind of stuff. So I have a couple of, I guess, tips for you to take away that are hopeful, I hope are helpful to you. One is, one of the most predictive things about either raising money or growing audience, they're in parallel, is frequency. Media is habit, and it's one of the hardest things for people who work for themselves to tackle. But in order to grow an audience, it doesn't mean you have to kill yourself to get a weekly podcast, but you do have to have something that's regular and that people can predict and count on, because they have other choices and their habits move on, and it's very hard to get them back. So you really have to think about frequency. You have to think about your length. We like to think about revenue in all kinds of ways. I used to say, there was a time when I used to say, we think about revenue as a three-legged stool, and you need all three. You need some licensing, you need some listener support, and then you need some ad support. I don't say that anymore because it's not true. There's so many creative ways that people are earning revenue, and there's so many ways that you should be thinking about it, some that haven't been tackled yet. So you have to think of yourself as an entrepreneur. You have to think of yourself as like way beyond just having audio skills. And I'm so sorry if that sounds like bad news to many people, but it's just not enough to be excellent at audio making. You actually have to really understand and have a greater fluency around metrics and around what works for other people. And you have to really improve your network abilities on who can help you and who can trade. Like Kristen said, what are the like shows that you can trade with? I'm very excited about about podcasting. I think it creates opportunities for women, for people of color, for underrepresented voices all around the world. So I'm kind of bullish on the fact that it's not as consolidated yet as it could be. So I think that there are things that we can all do to help pioneer new ways of thinking about revenue. But it does take bold risks, and it does take getting back up and resiliency for things that don't work. My other last piece of advice is try not to have epic fails. Try to really create, I know, that's so obvious. But we have a lot of shows that are super successful. They're some of the most successful in the world. And we have shows that are big and not successful. We have a whole range. But I've seen lots of creativity, and you have to apply the same amount of creativity that you do in making your show as to thinking about growing audience and revenue. And the most important thing is audience first, money second, and that's just the way it goes. You just have to have enough of an audience first.
Thank you. Just one question for the audience. Like, how many people pay to listen to podcasts, like through a subscription, paywall type service? Okay, looks like about 10 to 15%-ish, I think, maybe. Interesting. Do any of you have thoughts on the new subscription models? And do you have a philosophy on whether podcasts should be free for all? Or
I think about this a lot, too, because I just said that we have to be creative and we have to figure out how to find audience and deepen that engagement. And but I do think that podcasting is still in the toddler stage, even though it's been around for about 15 years. The time frame that most people know and talk about is really in the last 5, basically. And as I just said, there's been a lot of activity in the last 2. So I think that we want to be mindful of introducing friction. And it's just that simple. If we introduce a lot of friction, it will be hard to grow audience, and audience first, money second. So like that's just a mantra to keep saying.
I agree with you 100% and also disagree.
But
well, I don't know. I mean, I grew up in news and in newspapers and then, news websites where, a lot of things were being given away for free. And so philosophically, I think it's totally good to pay for things that you want to consume or watch or read. And I also think, I work in public media, so there's my sort of personal and my professional. Like we at WNYC, we make things for the public, and so that's one thing. But the other thing, I think, just for the industry writ large, I'm the more Luminary can put billboards around New York City, the better it is for anyone who's in podcasting. Yeah. So it might be that, you don't want to spend $7.99 a month and that's fine, but it means like a lot more people have heard the word podcast, and that is good for me. So I feel very excited about the subscription services, and I should probably subscribe to one. And I will.
Well, we need more experiments.
Yeah.
I mean, that's your point.
Yeah,
we
my
need,
point.
we need
like,
experiments, we need marketing dollars,
that,
and like it's all good.
Right.
It's all additive, and we need excellent content, and we need to, grow the on-demand audience for sure.
I mean, if there are some shows that, they can exist because Luminary is gonna, buy them for zillions of dollars, then that's great. But if it doesn't work out, they can take their show elsewhere. But experimenting is exciting for me.
Yeah, it's early. The market is still shaking out. I just want to shift to another topic on diversity in podcasting. So in some ways, this group is very diverse in terms of backgrounds, types of organizations, and in some ways it's not. I mean, we know that in the upper ranks of podcasting as a whole, women are still underrepresented, and people of color, transgender people, non-binary people, even less well represented. So I just want to know, how are you thinking about that in your organizations, and are you seeing shifts in that regard in terms of the type of people who are in decision-making positions? As I said in my opening remarks, I think it matters a lot who gets to decide. Who gets to decide what's made, who gets to decide what perspective is told from, what talent will be uplifted, what voices will be uplifted. So how are you all thinking about that in terms of your organizations?
I will say, being out here, we read Variety and The Hollywood Reporter and all those places, and there was an amazing Variety cover earlier this year that did seem to suggest that Conan O'Brien had invented podcasting. I was like, it's a good show, but I think because podcasting has been such a grassroots, ground-up medium, it is actually a place where more types of people have been able to make a name for themselves than traditional media, where you have to get greenlit by, a couple of us were talking backstage about a room full of literally 20 white men that they had to go through on the way to getting their job. So there is a diverse talent pool, but as podcasting consolidates, professionalizes, has to attract the attention of venture capitalists who are suddenly like, there's a pile of money over there? Oh, hello, we'd like to come there too. There's a lot of responsibility, I think, on all of us and leaders across the industry to make sure that the dynamics that can arise when a more traditional and money-oriented and finance-oriented and guys in suits sets of pressures apply to the industry. And I think, we're really thinking about that. I mean, we're sort of building an in-house podcast team from scratch at the LA Times because we've done a lot with partnership in our early experiments in the medium. And I think it's just essential that as we grow, we represent the city, we represent the broadest possible perspective of voices, because I think that's part of why podcasting has been successful, is that people hear in podcasts stuff that did not come to them necessarily over the airwaves.
I just want to say that it could not, I just have to say this, it's so, can I swear?
I think so. We're not on. We're not.
I'm not gonna swear
or anything.
But
No,
just
do
know,
it.
it's so fucking important that you have people who are not represented behind the scenes making decisions, all from top all the way down, because it's so important. And yes, that room, that was the 20 white men room, was my room. But you can see it every day at Crooked, where, the founders of Crooked Media are 3 white guys. And when they started Crooked Media, they told themselves that this company had to be what they weren't. And they had no idea what that meant. But they put it out there, and they were like, we have to make this true. And so they hired myself and my counterpart, our COO, Sarah Wick, 2 women running the company. And we proceeded to change their ideas and just define for them what that actually meant. You can put out the mission statement that you want to have, like, you want to have diverse storytelling, you want to, have representative voices on your network, but unless you put the people in power to understand what that means to make that real, it's not going to happen. The gap of experience is too wide. And so I'm constantly learning from the people that we hire, and we push ourselves really hard to make sure that that mission is really, really real, because it's about learning from each other in order to open the aperture of what experiences and stories you're telling. And you can't do that if you don't have people at the table who can tell you how to do that and what stories you should be telling. And so that's as much something I'm telling myself every day as I'm telling my bosses every day, as like the people who work at our company are telling me. So yeah, you got to do it.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. I completely agree with that, and I know that firsthand from actually working at Lifetime, where we made the decision to hire more women, and I hired my head of unscripted was Bree Bryant, and I would not have been. The R. Kelly doc would not have surfaced if she wasn't my head of unscripted development. And we're doing the same at Spotify. And one thing I'm really proud of that we've started is Sound Up Bootcamp, which is a program to surface diverse women's voices. It's 18,000 women applied the first time we did it. We picked 10 winners, flew them all to New York, gave them the training. Many partnerships here supported that training. And 3 finalists got $10,000 to make their podcasts. And then we chose one of them to Titi and Zakia, who are 2 amazing Duke grads that are now a podcast. We're taking that global, so we're taking it to Germany with LGBTQ and to Australia. So there are things you can do within your company to just, but ultimately it just comes down to saying we're going to hire more women as decision makers. And I'm lucky to work at a company where I'm a senior woman, but our chief content officer is also a woman, so.
Great. So I want to go to Christa, but I just have to say I discovered TT and Zakia on my flight here. They are available on Delta Airlines, Dope Labs, and I didn't want to get off the flight. Like I was on episode 2, and it's just really compelling. So kudos on that one. Kristen?
Yes, to what everyone else has said, and I just wanted to pick up on Tanya for a minute, that it's one thing to build a new organization. You also, sometimes organizations like mine that have been around for a long time, you have to actually reinvent, and you have to be willing to make hard decisions and sort of change the leadership from the top. And I was very aware this morning of what this panel looks like, and I think about my role running my organization a lot, and I think my job, frankly, is to rebuild the leadership of the organization and then get out of the way so panels like this look different in the future. I think you just have to make that kind of commitment to it. And also, I know at least in the journalism world, and I assume in kind of every sector, there's been a lot of focus in recent years about better hiring practices. And I think, frankly, that's the easy part. And I'm really tired of people talking about it, because if you haven't figured that out, forget it. It's really about what you do once you have a diverse organization to make it inclusive and equitable. And that's the really, really hard, painful work that is like messy, but I think you have to do it, or it's not gonna sort of be infused through everything you do and the audiences that you're reaching and the stories that you're telling and who's telling them and how you're telling them.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I've been thinking about podcasting. I haven't verbalized this yet, and I've been taking notes right here because I'm not so good on stages. But I have been thinking a lot of podcasting in like these kind of phases over the past 10 years, I guess. I feel like 10 years ago, a lot of us know, like it sort of started as kind of like an art bro medium, and like a lot of great shows came out of that. I have no problem with those guys, but it was very like kind of like cool white guy dominated. And then I feel like maybe about 5 years ago, it started to become more democratized, and there were a lot of good people coming into the space who were really investing in new voices, and that was when we had like 2 Dub Queens and Another Round, and and like Code Switch. And now I'm eternally optimistic about podcasting, so I don't want to sound negative right now, but we are kind of in a phase that started maybe a year ago where it's becoming more and more run by business bros who are coming into it, seeing this as like a big kind of like financial opportunity. They know like the word podcast is hot. They don't really know that much about it, but they know that they have to get in right now. And I'm in more rooms with like white businessmen now than I ever have been in this industry. And that's why I think like conferences like this are so important. Like we all need to be talking to each other. I want to talk to you all about like hiring you. And I think a lot of us want to talk about that. And I think it's like more important now than ever before to work together and get like, more women and non-binary people and people of color into more positions of power, which, it's like an easy thing to say, but it's a thing that we all have to work on more than ever so that the business bros don't take us all down.
Thank you. Just quickly. Yeah. One more, then we're going to move on.
I'll make it very quick. I was inspired by a conversation that Jenna had on this stage 2 years ago about this very topic. When you were forming your company, you talked about the values that were going to underlie basically the infrastructure. The scaffolding was all values. And I think as talent becomes more in demand and the money and the pay gets higher, that conversation about being a place that is equitable, like that is a place where smaller companies and public media can really thrive because we have that ability to really elevate those values and drive them through the workplace in a place, not that Spotify and Crooked, because they're so big or, don't have that. It's just that it's a mandate in some part. And, I also think as someone who's older than much older than the people I supervise, there is, on the part of managers, you have to lean in a totally different way to the younger staff so that they are empowered and that they can make decisions. And like, Arwen, I'm sure you're in the audience, like she's, she'll just say you're wrong on this. And it's like, I have to actually sit back and think, am I wrong? And I'm usually wrong, actually. So I'm very lucky that I have a team that is always right, so.
Well, that's a very, very big point, empowering your team. But also just have to say to all of you, like, don't be afraid to take on a leadership position or a management role, because what I've seen far too often is like, there's a lot of complaining about lack of diversity, in terms of gender identity, people of color in leadership roles. But often when we go to people who would be great managers, more often than you would think, we get the response, well, I just want to be a reporter. I just want to do my editing. I don't want to manage people. And, you kind of have to for this to change. So I just want to encourage you to take the challenge because we need you. And often the people who would be the best managers don't want to be managers. So I want to shift gears to a big picture question. What do you all see, we can have a number of people answer this, as the biggest challenge in podcasting in 2020?
I'll just jump in because the mic's closest to me. I think I do think it's discoverability and money. I think the advertising situation is, I don't know. I don't like the way it is. People have mentioned it up here. So I think that's the biggest challenge. It's really finding an audience, and I think the path forward is to find a network that makes sense and building that our own consolidation before we get consolidated out of existence. This is actually going back to agree with what Kerri said, but I think there is a little bit. I mean, in my job, my job is to is to find people and ideas that will lead to really powerful, impactful, immersive shows. And it's easy for me to get distracted by the audience question. This needs to be financially sustainable, audience sustainable, all that. And it can really, I think for creative people and for makers, when there is so many new shows flooding the space and so much money flooding it, it can be very distracting to actually what is the work that you're making. And so it's a little bit of like, it's a little bit of a hippie answer, but I just feel like all of this can be very distracting for the work that you're trying to do. And it's really important. I mean, that to me is the biggest risk, that some of the best work won't get done because we'll all be thinking about all these other things we have to do, which are really important, as we're all saying. And I totally, and I get it, so I don't want to undermine that. But I do think if you're a maker, you have to go out there and expose yourself to different interesting things that are going to get your brain firing so that you can end up making the really special work that will sort of rise through and not get distracted by all of this important but distracting stuff. Did you want this?
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, y'all, next year is 2020. It's the 2020 election. So if y'all got something to say, I agree with you, say it. Find a way to say it. Like, Crooked Media's here. Like, if you've got a show and you have something to say, like, if you, truly, I mean, that's all I'm thinking about. Sorry, when you said what's the biggest challenge in 2020, like, the big orange-haired Donald Trump just, like, came in front of my face. But, but it is podcasting is an intimate medium. It's a place where persuasion and convincing and just storytelling can actually change people's minds. So to me, it's like if one of your challenges is, I've got something to say, I have a story to share, and I don't know where to do it, that to me, podcasting is a great place to start. But you probably have a better advice.
Oh, I'm going to tag team on that.
Oh, sweet.
I like that. And I'm so glad somebody said the election, and I don't have to say that. So thank you.
Sorry.
I like if I could just widen the aperture a little bit and think a little bit beyond 2020, and maybe even borrow from the rearview mirror a little bit. But the piece that I really pay a lot of attention to is how do we keep opening things up in terms of how, who's participating, who's telling stories. The thing about podcasting that's so unusual is that there aren't a lot of gatekeepers and intermediaries right now. And so it's really important that we, and the role that I play for the company that I am a part of, I kind of talk about sharpening my elbows a little bit and standing up straight to leave some of that room for new entries to come in, whether we put a lot of money into training and podcast garages, and like, how do we just keep opening that up, much like what Spotify is doing as well. So I'm a champion of the values of the open web and openness in terms of who gets to say what and how. So I tag team on that, but I also just want to leave you with one piece of inspiration around this building. I've been thinking about this because I've been at the Ace Theater a lot. And in 1919, Mary Pickford, who was a silent film star, was one of the 4 people, and was the first female to do this, who started United Artists. And they did it because they wanted to control their own destiny, both creatively and from a business standpoint. And United Artists, is still a company today, and she was active up until the 1950s, and they built this theater. She designed it. There's murals on the wall when the lights are up. You should check them out because they're really about artists owning their stuff, telling the stories they want to tell, and like really taking charge. This is 1919. So Mary Pickford is like somebody you should be thinking about over these next 2 days. So she's inspirational.
Okay, so we're down to almost 5 minutes, so this is likely to be the last question, so I want everyone to answer it. This is kind of a lightning round, but you have like, 30 seconds? No. Okay, so we can just go down the line, or however people want to answer, but I want you to share either your favorite podcast, which is hard. I hate when people ask me that, or the biggest podcasting trend of this year that you think is impacting the marketplace. Who wants to start?
Want to go in order?
Sure, let's go in order.
I don't know if they're my favorite, but 2 that I've been listening to just in the last week that are, I've found some connections between them that have just been interesting. So one is The Realness from WNYC, and one is Threshold. And The Realness is about the rapper Prodigy and like goes deep into a slice of hip hop history. And Threshold is about a barrier island in the Arctic that is being threatened by climate change. And it also goes into the deep history of that place and colonialism, and it's really rich, but both of them are also about science, and they've done a beautiful job of weaving climate change science into Threshold and the history of sickle cell into the realness, and I think a lot about how you present deep and complicated information to audiences in compelling ways, and they both, I think, just do a beautiful job of it, so recommend those two.
Okay. A trend in podcasting?
A trend or your favorite podcast?
A trend is that it's doing incredibly well right now, and it's a wonderful industry to be in, and don't give up. And if you need like moral support, I'm Jenna at pineapple.fm, and I'll just keep telling you that it's a great place to be. And I love a podcast called A Woman's Smile, which is a really weird show that only had like 7 episodes and was from Forever Dog and is very creepy and weird and great, and I recommend it.
I'll do favorite because I don't think I can trend cast like Jenna, but and I'm also going to be kind of a corporate stoogie here because I love the show that Misha Youssef produced and that Arwen Nix oversaw called The Big One, about what's going to happen to California when a big earthquake hits. We actually did play a little bit of it on our radio, and someone had a panic attack and pulled over. So we had like a real life War of the Worlds situation. Everyone was fretting, and I was like, yes, it's working. They did a fantastic job on that. And then also, just because I'm a news junkie, In the Dark. I mean, that was, I think, the best piece of journalism I've heard in years. So those are my two.
I'm afraid to listen to The Big One. I just moved here from New York. Like, I just don't want to know. I've got a total head in the sand about earthquakes. For trend, I just want to stick up briefly for the subscription model in podcasting. There is a lot of friction in how do you pay and what do you pay for and what's the feed and what are the big yellow billboards. But before I was at the LA Times, I was at Slate, and Slate Plus, which is the membership model that really has helped that institution thrive, is very much driven by the connection that Slate's audience has with its podcasters. And I think as we expand our subscription model at the LA Times, it's something I'm going to be looking at closely. But if you can find a way to hook people with the free stuff, then you can sometimes get them to pay for extra stuff. And it's, I think that can be a way to get around some of the barriers. And so it's a medium that is so about forging an intimate connection with people that I think it's actually really ripe for that model. And I'm excited to see further experimentation with that. And my favorite podcast I've heard this year is one forthcoming later this year from the LA Times. So stay tuned.
Mystery.
Hi again. So just real quick on trends, I'm starting to see in podcasts, there's almost like a template, like a lot of podcasts sound the same, or there's a way to do them, or a podcast should be about this or about that, and that can be a really good thing, but I'm also hoping that, to me, it's such a playful art form, and as a creator, it's so freeing. And I hope that there are other creators out there who are going to continue to like push and crack open and do different things, and just be, silly with what a podcast is and what it should sound like. I mean, speaking of A Woman's Smile, that one is just so absurd and wonderful, and you couldn't think of it yourself. So I just hope that we're going to be seeing more things that are kind of pushing the boundaries of what a podcast is and is supposed to be. And if you have an idea like that, Earios would love to hear it. And then, is it okay to plug your own podcast? Yes, it's not the big one about the earthquake, but if you add an S, it's a wonderful podcast, The Big One's about moral dilemmas. So check it out.
I'll just say the podcast that I just listened to, like all the episodes in a row nonstop that I couldn't stop listening to, is called The Thing About Pam. It's not like anything I've done, and I just loved it. It was just very absorbing. And then Caliphate was another one this year that I just like completely ate up. So recommend them both.
I do a lot of listening, and I'm going to pick up some new ones that you've all said, so I appreciate the curation here we're getting. In terms of trends, I feel like what Jenna said. I mean, I feel very bullish on podcasting. I'm very excited about the global wave that's happening. More and more people are getting into it, and more people are expanding what it means and what it does. So I'm just very optimistic and excited. Even though I do a lot of listening, the podcasts that I'm the most proud to be part of, and I'm proud of our organization for taking such a strong risk on, and I can't get enough of, is really Ear Hustle, and I just keep going back to it. They do an amazing job, and it's a privilege to be working with that team.
Yeah, Ear Hustle is awesome. Very good. I really like The Read, because it's the best. So I listen to that, and occasionally, sometimes I'll dip into lore, because I like to scare the crap out of myself. So those are two that I listen to.
So I got to plug. I mean, I really spend most of my time just listening to stuff that we produce, because we produce so much. And so I love The Business, which is a weekly show about the business of Hollywood. Excellent journalist, Kim Masters, who hosts that show, and it's so engaging every single week. And then I will not give you a trend forecast, because I do not know. So.
Well, I think Jenna already knows this, but I was obsessed with The Clearing. I just love the found footage, the way the story was told, and the intimacy of, and how much I fell in love with April, the main character. I would say I would like to make a prediction and a challenge for this room. We just, in terms of the discovery question and how we can surface each other's podcasts. So we announced this week that you can make your own playlist for podcasting on Spotify. So if everyone in this room who subscribes to Spotify or doesn't, you can subscribe free, make a playlist, put 10 women's podcasts on the site, and you will help hundreds of great podcasts get discovered. We've found Your Daily Drive and playlists to be a tremendous way to surface, and we want to get new podcasts out there, so you can post a new one every day.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. So we're officially out of time, but wait, I have to plug our podcast coming out next week. Dolly's America is about Dolly Parton, and it's going to be awesome. It's about her role as a unifier and in this moment in American history. I can't explain it fast enough, but trust me, it's great. So check it out. Just announced. So let's thank this amazing panel: Jennifer Ferro, Kerri Hoffman, Amanda Lund. I'm trying to remember. Kristen, Muller, Christa Scharfenberg, Liz Gateley, Tanya Sotomayor. This is a pop quiz for me. Paula Schumann, Julia Turner, and Jenna Weiss Berman. How did I do? Amazing. So I hope this is a great teaser of what's to come. Now I'm so excited because I get to go sit in the audience and listen to all this amazing talent to come. So enjoy the rest of your time here, and thank you all again for participating.
I think from now on, like, panic attack is the gold standard for any podcast. I just want to also thank so much, like, that there were enough people on stage to look like a volleyball team. And I think we've all seen panels or been on panels where mics are not passed as gracefully and as graciously. There's a lot of rooms in which someone would have been camping on a mic, so very well played. I saw a lot of people taking notes throughout that panel. I wanted to share a couple of the highlights as I saw them. I thought it was such a good point to be reminded of the fact that our favorite podcasts essentially transmit the same way that a lot of the art that we're most excited about does. That discovery happens like person by person. You know, it's when you text your mom. So when I was backstage, I texted my mom. I think the podcast that I've heard most recently that I was really stoked about was Truth Be Told. Really, really killer stories. Also, I just thought an undisclosed amount of a lot of money was a really great turn of phrase. Well played, Depelsha. As we set up for the next conversation, I saw a lot of shoulders fall when Jenna mentioned that only 1% of podcasts we're profitable. So we will be talking about money in a moment, but I wanted to take care of a couple of housekeeping issues as well. For those of you that are shivering, yeah, I know. Look at me, I know. I'm wearing a baby fat jacket that I dug out of my closet. The AC has been turned off. Things will get better. That's gonna be the biggest applause all day. Also, if you haven't yet been, there is programming on our second stage. That second stage is on the second floor of the hotel. You can find the entire list of the entire list of events. If you open the program that you were provided, you can see a schedule there. It's got some amazing hosts and producers. The full schedule is printed, and you can check out the manifestos that are going on continuously throughout the day. For our next segment, we'll be talking about money. How to get paid, yeah? So I'm now gonna ask that you welcome our moderator, Nicola Korzenko. She's the general manager of Pod Fund, which just launched this past spring in partnership with Radio Public. It is the first dedicated source of funding for podcasters, which I think is gonna make her very popular in this room, and a perfect person to lead this conversation. Thank you so much, Nicola. Perfect. And now please help me welcome our panelists as well. We have Stacy Book, we have Paula Mardo, and Dory Shafrir. Welcome to stage.
Hi, guys. So the goal of this panel is to demystify funding options and help creators understand and evaluate which options will be right for them. And when we say funding or financing, what we really mean is how you pay the bills. And the reason that this panel is called The Price of Money is because not all money is created equal. There's no such thing as free lunch. And it's a very personal decision, and the answer might be different for everyone. Also, time is a finite resource. So as you're making your show and building your business, where's the best place to spend your energy? But before we go too far, I want to first allow the panelists to introduce themselves. So if you could say your name, the name of your podcast/company, and what forms of funding that you've employed or currently employ. Do you want to start with you, Stacy?
Sure. I'm Stacy Book. I am the founder of Fugitive Minds. We are a venture-funded company.
My name is Paula Mardo. I'm the host, creator, producer of Long Distance, a podcast about stories in the Filipino diaspora. Earlier this year, we were selected for the Google Podcast Creator Program, and we're working on season 2 through that. And so in terms of funding, as an independent producer, I guess I pursue kind of like a diversified stream of funding. One is grants through the Accelerator Program, membership through Patreon, donations, and then for season 2, sponsorships.
I'm Dory Shafrir. I'm the co-host of Forever 35, and we have sponsorships, and we also have funding through some affiliate linking.
Awesome. Yeah. And just a reminder, I'm Nicola Korzenko. I'm the general manager of Pod Fund, the first and only independent source of capital and advisory for podcast creators, studios, and networks. So just to sort of set the stage, we're going to talk about getting started, what the options look like in the first phase of the business, dive into various funding models and the pros and cons of each, and then at the end, we'll sort of talk about some takeaways and some lessons learned. So for the purpose of this discussion, we're going to talk about podcasting as a business where the goal is to become sustainable and profitable. And as I sort of mentioned, there are real time/resource constraints. Often creators are acting as both the chief content and the chief finance officer. And so you sort of have to wear many hats. The first question I want to sort of do a quick kind of sort of temperature check from everyone is, what percentage of your time do you spend on content versus the business side of things? And has that changed over time? So anyone who wants to jump in first.
Well, I always say I, produce the show, but I'm also the head of marketing and the head of business development. I started the show on my own, but I do work with a producer. But we are also producing video content, and he's leading that. I lead the audio, and the marketing and the business and funding stuff kind of comes in too. So it's a lot, but it's fun.
Would you say it's like 50-50 or?
It's a good question. I feel like it's still 70% I'm making the show, but I do have to set aside some time to do the marketing and the funding and all that. It comes gradually. I didn't start out doing that. When I first started the show, I was doing it, on my own time, on my own dime, no funding at all, and it was a monthly show, so I had kind of that luxury not to really worry about too much business stuff. But I think this season has been a little bit more like about prioritizing between production and the business stuff, but I still focus more on content.
Fugitive is a venture-funded company, and so for me as CEO, I spend a lot of time in business development. And we went through a venture funding round this summer, but I have a team that spends a lot of time doing creative and developing original content. So I get to come in sort of on top of that and talk about whether it makes sense for our brand and where the market is for the show. And sometimes I get to say, this is something I really want to make. But most of my time, I would say probably 70-30, is spent doing business development.
For me, it's really kind of ebbed and flowed. We launched in January 2018 as an independent podcast. And so initially, kind of 100% of our time was pretty much spent on content. But we, as I'm sure we'll touch on a little bit later, we got sponsorships pretty quickly, and then it shifted because sponsorships get you money, but they're also a lot of work. And so kind of the height of doing all of that on our own, it was probably 60-40 content and business. A couple months ago, we signed with a network, and so that has taken some of the business stuff off of our plate, and I would say now it's probably like 75-25 or 80-20.
Cool. And so, yeah, well, you brought up revenue, advertising and sponsorship. One of the best ways to fund a business is through revenue, and in podcasting, sort of the dominant form of revenue is in advertising and sponsorship. And it is typically unusual for a show to launch out of the gate with a network, and so a lot of creators are sourcing and executing sort of ad sales deals in-house. Dory, you have sold ads for your own show. How did you sort of know how to do that? And yeah, did you sell on a flat fee or a CPM? Like, did you have an agreement that you had, already used in the past? Like, how did you know where to get started?
So I knew a little bit because I have another podcast that I do with my husband called Matt and Dory's Excellent Adventure about doing IVF. And we had signed with Midroll, which is an ad network, about a year after we launched. And so even though I wasn't selling ads for that podcast, I was kind of familiar with the language of sponsorship, and I knew how much we were making from those sponsorships and what a CPM was. And so I was able to take some of that knowledge and apply it to Forever 35. And we were approached about sponsorship really early, I think even before our first episode. We had started an Instagram for the show, and someone who already followed me on my personal Instagram followed the show, and she DM'd me, and she wanted her company to advertise. She wanted to be a launch sponsor of the podcast. So that was amazing, great. So we signed her up, and she actually used a contract template that we ended up, like an insertion order template that we just ended up copying and using for a bunch of our other, especially independent sponsors. And we were kind of quickly approached by other agencies. We were very fortunate in that it was all inbound. We didn't have to kind of go out and pound the pavement. So that was amazing, but it was a lot of coordination and also like figuring out how much you're worth is, it's tough. And we had to kind of play around with that a little bit.
And you also mentioned that you joined a network, Acast. Mm-hmm. Was that sort of the goal from the beginning? And what are the benefits of being part of a network?
It definitely wasn't the goal from the beginning. But I think as the months went by, we started being approached by networks, and we were sort of like, this could be helpful in a lot of ways. Like, this could help us grow our show, and this could help us get other sponsorships that we can't get on our own. But we decided to kind of wait to see how far we could kind of take the show on our own. And we got to a point earlier this year where we were like, okay, we could really use some help. We felt like we had kind of reached a point where we didn't have any more bandwidth to do the business stuff. And we also, neither of us has a sales background, and we were sort of winging it for a while, but there comes a point, I think, where it's good to like bring in the professionals. And so we started talking to a bunch of different networks, and that was when we chose to sign with Acast.
And how has it been so far?
It's been great. We love Acast. They're great partners for us, and all the things that we wanted them to do have happened. Like, it's really nice to not have to sell ads anymore, I will say.
Nice. And so ads are obviously not the only way to monetize, and increasingly there are tools that allow creators to directly monetize their audiences, and whether that's through donations, patronage, memberships, subscriptions. Paula, you mentioned Patreon. When did you decide to launch that initiative, and what kinds of perks do you offer to Patreons?
To be honest, I was very, hesitant to ask money from listeners. I wanted to, do a show that they could listen to for free for as long as possible. So I didn't really think about crowdfunding or Patreon even until towards the end of the first season. So I launched in October of 2018, and around like the spring, or like a little before spring, as we were planning to end this season, a producer on the show, he's had experience crowdfunding through Kickstarter, so he kind of had that knowledge. But we also wanted to explore Patreon specifically because, first of all, over the course of the season, people would contact me, like email, Instagram, whatever, and be like, how can I give you money so you can do more of this? And it was a monthly show, so they're like, how can I give you money so you could do more episodes? And so we threw up like a PayPal link on the website, and we get like $50 here, $10 there, and that was fine. But towards the end of the season, I was like, okay, let's try the Patreon, see what would happen. I don't depend on that as a primary stream of income. I know there are other shows that make a ton of money on Patreon, but for me, it is a very specific audience, and honestly, a lot of them are Gen Z, young millennials. They don't have a ton of money yet, so I don't push them on that. But we launched, I guess it was either May or June. We did a video, and to me, it was more about building a community and not so much like, give me money, It was kind of telling my listeners and being open with them and transparent, like, hey, it's a documentary-style show. There's a lot of work that goes into it. It does take money. Would you want to help in that? And so far, the response has been pretty good.
Does it take more work to manage the membership?
Well, we don't do a ton of perks, so we're pretty straightforward in that, I'm not going to give you a T-shirt. We do give stickers, and I have some if anyone wants some later. But as far as perks, no. We have promised certain tiers. So I do like 3 tiers, and like the top 2 tiers, I believe, get episodes like ahead of time, or that's what we're doing for the upcoming season. And then, we do we haven't done it yet, but we are going to do for this season live streams and maybe some like bonus content, not highly produced stuff, but low friction, bonus content that we can offer them in the form of live streams or like extra interviews or things like that. We already do that on Instagram, and so we figured we could do something a little bit more exclusive for Patreon.
Cool. Another recurring trend that we've noticed is studios employing a hybrid strategy where they often will subsidize original production with branded content or work for hire. Stacy, since you guys do a little bit of that, how do you spend your time or split your time between originals and client work in developing original shows?
Yeah, branded content is great for us. It affords us a lot of opportunity to have some extra resources to make shows in partnership with lots of other people. And so I would say we're probably about sort of a 60-40 split where 60% of our time is focused on our original content. And, it's a little early for us. We haven't officially launched yet. We're still in production on lots of stuff. And so it'll be interesting to me to see how that equation evolves, but we've had more brands and platforms and people coming to us recently because I think podcasting is exploding everywhere, right? And it's like the hot thing to do right now. So you have a lot of people out there that are really looking to figure out how to get their brand into the audio business. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in branded content. The thing I will say as a sort of a cautionary tale, because I did branded content in television, for a while as well, and you have to be really careful about what kinds of deals you take when you're working with a brand or you're working with a client, and don't sell yourself short on resources because there is no magic solution to not having enough to make the show the way that the client wants it or the way that you want it, and your name's going to be on it. So that it only ends up in a painful, hard, awful solution.
How did you decide how to price that part of the product, like by minute, episode, margin, cost plus margin? How did you decide how to make that call?
Yeah, there are a lot of theories about this. For us, we try to be as flexible as possible. It's whatever's going to work best for the project. But most of the time, our deals look like cost of production plus a margin. And that margin can be made up of different elements. It can be cash, it can be points on a rev share, it can be points on changed media. There are a lot of different ways to make it work for you and for your client. And that's what we have found is that being flexible is a really an asset that we can bring to the table that is great for us and for everybody else.
How do you find clients? Or do most of them come to you?
That's a good...
You launched or sort of set up the company somewhat recently, so how did you get sort of the name out there with potential clients?
So initially for us, and again, it's early, and so, ask me this question in 6 months and we'll see the answer could be different. But I had relationships coming into the business that I spent a lot of time talking to people, and it's the networking thing. It's making a lot of phone calls and calling up all your friends and all the people that you know and everybody that you've worked with, and telling them what you're doing and asking for their suggestions. And that is initially really where I started with this. And our first branded show was with Audible, and that was because I had this relationship with the head of original content there, going back, a little while. And we came up with some ideas that we felt like would be really good Audible ideas and pitched them, and one of them went through. And so, since then, we've had some people come to us, certainly, and I've done a lot of work to just talk to folks and tell them what we're doing, and sometimes it takes a long time for those deals to come through, but it's a long game.
So another source of funding, a great source if you can get it, is grant funding, although it may not be available to all creators depending on what kinds of stories you're telling. Paula, you have extensive experience applying for grants, and earlier this year, you completed the Google Podcast Creator Program with PRX. How did you find out about grants that aligned with your show and your vision?
A lot of research and Googling. And, the funny thing is, so I've been working on this show technically since 2016, so it's been like a couple years in the making. And it started out as like me being interested in stories of my community here in LA, and it kind of grew from there. And honestly, I think one way it did grow was I applied to so many different grants and programs and just kept refining like what the show was gonna be about. Initially, it was gonna be a hyper-local show about the historic Filipino town community here in LA. And then it was like, okay, maybe it'll be more like Code Switch style, and I can have a co-host, and we'll do some reported stuff and talk show stuff. And then it just kept evolving every time I applied to something. And I got rejected a ton, which is part of the process. But I learned kind of through that. And that just kind of improved the show and improved my grant application, honestly. So that by the time I applied for the Google thing, I was like, oh, I got this. Yeah, I would say it's a process. And the great thing about podcasting, because it is still pretty new, especially compared to like film, there's a lot of grant funding out there for all kinds of media projects, art projects. You just have to kind of, I don't want to say spin your application, but like, form it towards, making an audio series or a podcast. And there's a lot of stuff. You just have to look it up. One of the earliest grants I did apply for, I didn't get it, but got close, was the Cal Humanities grant. So I think it's more for like California-based shows or producers. I mean, most people know it as a film documentary grant. And when I went there, I think it was 2016, they had a workshop. I was the only person there asking about audio, but it did say they fund radio/podcasts. But like 2 years ago, nobody knew that, but they were funding radio stuff. So, and they're very open to it too. So you'll be surprised how many of these grant organizations are open to podcasts, or may just not know that there are a lot of podcasts that would align with their vision. So it's a lot of research.
How has your application strategy evolved over time?
Don't apply, well, give yourself time. I once did one in a day and that nearly killed me. Do not advise that. I think just getting into the habit of it and applying to things as much as possible. I mean, it's really hard when you're working on a show to like set aside time, to let me like write this 20-page grant proposal. Not everybody's into that. If you have the ability or the capability to hire a development person or someone to actually do it for you or with you, that might help. But yeah, I think it's time management.
Got it. So another interesting trend that we've seen, especially as of late, is the entrance of talent agents into podcasting. Major talent agencies like CAA and UTA have started to pay attention to podcasts and actually have started repping creators and studios. Dory and Stacy, both of you have worked with talent agents in the past. What does that relationship look like?
So our agent is Oren Rosenbaum at UTA, and when we were thinking about signing with the network, he helped us kind of navigate that whole process and got us conversations and meetings with different networks and kind of helped guide us through all the different networks and figure out which one was right for us. And then, agents also help you get funding. They help you get money. So when we were talking to networks, Oren was able to negotiate a guarantee for us that we would get from the networks that we were talking to. And for us, because we'd been selling our own ads, it was important that when we signed with a network, which does take a commission, and then Oren also takes a commission, that we would be approaching what we were making on our own, where no one was taking a commission. So that was just something that, we were kind of working out with him. And then, down the road, I think Oren and UTA will be helpful in terms of building our show, building our brand. If we decide to do live shows, that's something they can help us with. So it's just nice to have someone in our corner. We've found the relationship to be really beneficial.
So we speak to the talent agencies, sort of all of them, because part of what we are doing is having conversations about, do they have talent that are good, that might be good for our shows? So we're not signed specifically with anybody, in part so that we can work with everybody. And every agency we have found has a different sort of theory of the world about podcasting because it's so new, and they're all sort of taking different approaches to it. So it's, they're worthwhile conversations to have, absolutely. UTA is fantastic, I will say. They were sort of first into podcasting and have, the best sort of grasp of the business and have put a lot of resources into it. But everybody else is also sort of working on that too, and they're all coming at it from different angles. So that's, we also work with lots of different talent managers. It's Los Angeles. There are you can throw a rock and hit a manager. But they're great for, managers that manage writers and directors and, journalists, and they all have projects that are looking for a place to get out there into the world. And so if you're looking for something to option or something to, or a creator to work with, a journalist to work with who's got some piece of IP, all of these people have access to lots of different ideas out there. So those are all, it's all sort of good places for us when we're thinking about developing new shows.
Dory, a follow-up question for you. What is that, so in that relationship, are they employed or in play for every deal that you do, or do you just sort of leverage the agent for specific deals or opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, they now represent us for all of our podcast-related dealings. But we're not so much striking individual deals anymore now that we've signed with a network. That was kind of the big deal that they were helping us with. But as other stuff comes up, I'm sure we'll be talking to them about it.
Do you still sell any of your own ads, or you just sort of go directly?
No, I mean, I assume this is the case for most networks. When you sign with a network, they have exclusivity to sell your ads. So we still get a lot of inbound interest, and it is very nice to be able to forward those emails and not have to deal with them.
So over the last couple of years, more venture dollars have flown into podcasting. I think in 2019, it's already $271 million. Although most of that is going to tech platforms and services. And I think that increased activity excites some people but makes other people a little nervous. Stacy, you raised venture funding earlier this year for Fugitive. Can you tell us about your thought process? Did you know from the start you wanted to go down that path?
No. And part of that is because it's really hard to raise venture capital against a content business. And lots of people told me that when we first started having these conversations. It's a great idea, you're never gonna get money. But we spent a lot of time thinking about the shows that we wanted to make and how we were gonna kind of put the company out into the world. And I felt like we had this really compelling story to make about how we were going to build a successful company. And in order to do that, we needed money up front. We needed to be able to finance these shows that were going to be expensive shows, that were going to be really narrative and really cinematic and, sort of take place all over the world in some cases. And so we got to a point where we said, I think that the story that we have to tell about our business is compelling, and there's a world out there now that is maybe interested in hearing it, and let's give it a shot. And so we did, and went out there and started talking to people and talking to different venture capital firms, and got a lot of you're a content business. We don't fund content businesses. But there are people that do, and that's actually really exciting, because I think it'll allow lots of people to make really great stuff, and that's what we're hoping to do.
How familiar were you with investment terms going into the process?
So I had some familiarity with venture capital because I came from a startup before this, but I wasn't responsible for raising the venture capital, so that was really daunting and a whole new experience for me. But you learn, you talk to a lot of people, you ask a lot of questions, and the thing that has been great about having investors is, and I think we've also gotten lucky with the people that are on our team, is that they're on your team now, so you have these investors that are invested in you, and they are in your corner, and so you can call them up and ask them questions, and it's great. You get a lot of great advice. You get somebody to bounce ideas off of. You get somebody to, help you sort of put your brand and your product out into the world. And so for us, it's been fantastic thus far.
What kinds of investment terms should creators be prepared to sort of confront or know ahead of time?
So there are different investment vehicles that are out there. depending on your company and your stage. For us, we have investment on a convertible note and we have investment on a SAFE. Because we're a new company, evaluation wasn't going to mean anything for us up front. There was nothing to value. So a priced round is sort of later on in our future. But, the convertible note is essentially a loan, sort of structured like a loan. A SAFE is another investment term that comes from Y Combinator, and it's actually a really nice vehicle for venture capital investment because it's relatively simple, and it doesn't require you to value your company up front. And so we have investment on both of those things. I would suggest, if you're going out there to get investment, to not have two different vehicles. It's always better to just have one, just use the SAFE or just use the note or whatever. But sometimes that's not possible. So you kind of puzzle piece it together until you have what you need.
And I'm playing a little bit dumb here because also PodFund is an investor in Fugitive Minds. How did you actually find PodFund? What appealed to you about us?
So we actually, PodFund was recommended to us, by a number of different people, and as we were having these conversations and with other venture firms. And PodFund is designed to fund creators, which is fantastic. There's basically nobody else out there whose mission is to fund content creators and not some tech platform or analytics or podcatcher or something like that. So that's great, and I'm hopeful that there will be more people that sort of follow that lead and put more money into podcast creators, because there's so many talented people working out there in podcasts, and imagine what you could do with a little funding. It's fantastic.
So last question for the group. What do you know now that you wish you had known when you were first starting out? Or what are the, one or two most important lessons that you've learned?
Who wants to go first? I guess I would say you can, this might sound super simple, but you can be the creative person that makes the show, and you can also be the business person that figures out how your show is going to make money. You can do both of that. It may not happen right away. I think Stacey mentioned it's a long game. It really is. I think right now everyone's in this frenzy of podcasts are awesome, let's be successful. But in reality, you want to build a sustainable show and also a sustainable business, and that doesn't always happen overnight. It could, but me doing my show, I know it's very specific. I know it's for a very particular audience, and most of them don't listen to podcasts yet because they're international. So I'm going to play the long game and wait for those folks to find my show, find new ways of finding those people so they can listen to the show, and then build from there. So,
I feel like I'm still learning this, but one of the things that I think has been challenging for me as a business person is kind of anticipating our needs. And so, we have an assistant now, but it took us, we felt like we were at the breaking point until we hired an assistant. And so it would have been nice to have that assistant 3 or 4 months before we actually hired her. And so that's something that I'm still kind of figuring out. So I don't know if that's something that I guess I've learned that, but I don't feel like I've conquered it.
I don't think there's enough time left for me to talk about all the things I've learned. I think a really good sort of lesson I learned was to really be clear about what you are good at creating, what your core competency is, and get help doing all of the other stuff. There's a lot of aspects to this business and a lot of things that you need to learn to, be good at it. And for us, our future is predicated on us being successful and actually making money. And there are plenty of things about podcasting that I did not know going into podcasting. And so be clear about what you know and what you don't know, and get the advice because there's the other thing about this industry is that there's so many people willing to talk to you and give you that advice, and it's just like it's a wonderful community. And then, also like make the things that you love to make. That's super important. Don't go out there making things that like you feel like you should make because somebody else told you that that's where there needs to be a show. Like, make the stuff that you love to make. That's why we're all in podcasting.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys again. So we have just about 5 minutes left. So I think we'll open up for Q&A. I can't really see anyone, but I think probably there are people with microphones who can help.
I think there's mics in the front.
Oh yeah, there's mics like right there.
Yeah. Okay,
1 and 2.
Okay, great. So if people want to come up to the stage, there are mics in the front if you want to ask questions. Does anyone have any questions about money or the price thereof?
Someone has a question.
Oh, yeah. Hi. Sorry to the podcast listeners out there.
Hi, thank you so much. This is so informative, and I really appreciate it. I wanted to talk a bit about the branded worlds. You talked about that as a common way to approach things is to spend maybe 40% of your time on branded content and the rest on original content. From where you guys sit, do you think that the interest in branded content from private companies is only increasing? Do you think it's going to plateau at a certain point? Do you have any sense of kind of where that's going in the next couple of years?
I can talk about this a little bit since we do this. I think that you're going to see more brands in podcasting. I think you are seeing them come into it, in the ad sales world. I think you're going to see them want their own original content. Lots of brands have an interest in this, and they don't really know exactly how to approach it. There's branded content means a lot of different things to different people, so that is an important thing to get your definition with them really clear before you start, but so that expectations are all out there on the table. But I think you will see more brands and more companies come into podcasting and want to be associated with really good content.
Yeah, and I would also say, my show has a international audience to it, and I've been talking to folks, not just specifically about branded content, but also collaborations. I think we'll see a lot more of that too, especially international. So if your shows have, a diaspora population or some kind of international audience, I think there are companies out there who don't even know much about podcasting and they're just starting to learn about it. So yeah, I think we'll see more of them in the podcast space.
Actually, that reminds me of a question. Oh, actually, we have a question from the audience. Please go for it.
Yeah, I wanted to know more about the venture capital funding because I really don't understand that. So can you just talk very layman's terms, how do you start that? And then what kinds of podcasts are even appealing to venture capital folks?
Yeah, so venture capital is, investment funding, right, at its base level. So that kind of funding can come from lots of different places. It can come from friends and family. It can come from independent angel investors. And then you have big, venture capital firms. A lot of them are based in Silicon Valley, right? Because that's where tech it's all venture funded. And so for a startup company, if you're looking to take on investment, a lot of people are going to recommend do your first round as a friends and family round. And so your seed round, whatever it is that you sort of need to kind of build your runway, get your, a year or 18 months or whatever it is that you feel like you need to generate revenue and generate some numbers and things like that. And there's an endless amount of advice about raising capital and raising venture funding. And you sort of have to find the fit that works well for you. And then the sort of unfortunate part about the venture funding at a higher level, especially when you're starting out, is that it's all requires introductions. Or the warm introduction is what you need to get from somebody to somebody else at a venture firm before they'll actually talk to you.
Although you actually just reached out and I responded.
It's true. That was
so
that
that
was
works
quite,
too sometimes.
Yes, that was an unusual situation, but definitely that does work. Yeah.
And to the second part of the question about what kinds of shows venture capitalists are interested in. So for Pod Fund, well, a couple of small distinctions. One is we're not truly really investing in shows or individual podcasts. We're really investing in the creator, the creative team, because we believe that that is the source of value, that is the core asset. And so there may be one show, there may be many shows, the show may change, but we're really investing in the team. And we have two different ways of investing. One is a revenue-based financing, which is just more of a lightweight agreement to share revenue for a fixed period of time, and there's no ownership of any kind involved. And we find that appeals to some podcasters, that arrangement. And then we also can do more traditional ownership-based kind of what we call equity investments, where in exchange for the capital, we're actually buying a small percentage of the company. And for us, we're very much interested in the sort of Venn diagram overlap of like really high quality, interesting storytelling, creative talent, and like financial viability. And so, you know, we need to understand, and so part of the process of the venture capital or just sort of financing discussion is like, is there a plan in place how you make money? Because we need to make sure that that part is in place as well. So I think we're just about out of time, but I think we covered a lot of ground. Thank you so much to my panelists for joining us, and thanks to Werk It.
Thank you.
Okay. Hey, will you please help me thank all of our panelists from that section? Thank you for the frank conversation. For this next segment, we'll be able to watch a live taping of a podcast. I'm super stoked about it. When I was in the green room downstairs mashing on snacks, I got to catch some of their pregame ritual, including like hand signals and their plans to keep everything on time. So if you haven't heard of the podcast, This Is Uncomfortable, then this will be your first opportunity to see them live and in action, and you'll also have an opportunity, to some extent, to participate. The host is Rima Reis, and she works talking through the uncomfortable situations that sometimes arise in office environments, from the big to the really small, high stakes to low. So everything from what counts as exploitative conduct to like, yo, remember when like 2 weeks ago I bought lunch and then you said that you were gonna Venmo me and then it's been like 10 days. How long has gone on before the statute of limitation runs out on Venmo exchanges, that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna ask now if you'll help me welcome Rima and her team to stage. Rima, welcome.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Good. Thank you all so much for being here. This is our first live taping for This Is Uncomfortable, so we're really excited. My name is Rima Reis, and I am the host of This Is Uncomfortable, which is a show from Marketplace about life and how money messes with it. And if you haven't heard it, it's not necessarily a podcast about saving or how to invest. It's really a podcast about our feelings, how money impacts our romantic relationships or our friendships, how it shapes our identities or the jobs we go after. We launched earlier this year in June, and every week I work with a really talented team of producers to push out a new episode. And we're called This Is Uncomfortable because it can be really uncomfortable to talk about money. There's a lot of shame and secrecy wrapped up in it. And so part of our mission is to make it not feel so uncomfortable. And so to get started today, I want to get a sense of the room and ask you all some questions. So raise your hand if you would feel comfortable telling the person next to you how much money you make. I'm gonna get a little closer so I can see you all. Okay, so a good number of hands. Okay, keep your hands up if you would feel comfortable telling the entire room how much money you make. Okay, some hands went down. And keep your hands up if you are happy with how much money you make. There's like one hand that just went down. So the reason I bring this up is because today we are going to talk about salaries and specifically salary negotiations. And then later I'm going to be joined on stage by Julia Furlan and Keisha TK Dutess. But first, we're going to get started with a little story that is airing on this week's podcast. So about 3 years ago, Caitlin Boston decided it was time. During her performance review, she was going to ask her boss for a pay raise. Caitlin had been working at this design agency in New York for 2 years in user experience research, and she was armed with all of the reasons for why she should get a $10,000 pay raise. She had been working crazy hours and just landed a massive multi-million-dollar project, and with more than 7 years under her belt, she had been assuming a lot of leadership positions.
I knew I was really good at my job. So I felt super prepared.
So Caitlin walks into her boss's office, takes out her bullet-pointed list, and makes her case. Then her boss, with zero hesitation, says no, she's not there yet. So Caitlin asked her what specific concrete things she could do to get a raise, and her boss, she just went back to her go-to line. That's when Caitlin did the thing we all do when we're angry at work. She found her closest colleague and vented. I mean, who amongst us hasn't left our manager's office and immediately went to tell a group of women?
She was like, how did your conversation go? Are you okay? And I was like, I'm not okay. I'm really not okay. Does this look like I'm okay? Because I'm not okay.
There were actually a lot of whispery conversations that day. 3 of Caitlin's closest colleagues had their reviews and also asked their manager for a raise, and they'd all been rejected.
I think we all found a little deflated because it was sort of, well, what do we need to do? Because you're looking at 4 different flavors of excellent, and if 4 different flavors of excellent is still not enough, then, what ice cream shop are we having to go into here? Because, look at us. We are everything you could want.
So Caitlin and her coworkers decided to go out to eat that night, a kind of misery loves company and this together kind of dinner. And that's when they shared the hard numbers, how much money they make. At the table, there were 4 women. 3 of them were people of color, including Caitlin, she's Korean American, and all 3 of them had at least 7 years of experience. One had a PhD. It turned out they were making the same amount of money, a high 5-figure number. And then there was one white woman who was fresh out of college.
She's like, I feel bad, but I'm making the same amount. And I think we all just kind of turned.
Wait, so just to be clear, all 4 of you all were being paid the same amount?
The exact same number.
Wow.
And Caitlin says this 24-year-old, she was a hardworking, deserving person. It wasn't about her, but it just didn't feel fair that somebody at her level would be making the same as seasoned coworkers with advanced degrees. Caitlin went home that night, and the gears in her head were turning.
I'm going to ask my male coworker tomorrow, who I'm close to, what he's making, because I just need to make sure, I just need to validate that we're all being screwed equally.
This male coworker, he was someone who had the same exact qualifications, same job title as her. So the next morning, Caitlin pulled him aside, told him everything, and then asked him the question.
I think at that point, I was just getting so anxious about it. I was like, I need to ask you, I really like to know what you're making, because I need to find out if we're all being screwed or if you're being made more, because if you're making more, that's really not gonna be okay.
And Caitlin, she could tell he was getting uncomfortable.
Oh, he's like, yeah, I don't know. So that's when I just kind of improv'd the question of hey, if I ask you if you're making over or under this number, can you just say, I'm making over or under? And that's when I saw him kind of relax, and he was like, yeah. He's like, I can do that. I can do that.
Okay.
And I picked what I thought was a really egregiously high number. And he, goes, oh yeah, I'm making under that. And then I picked a number that was $10,000 less than that. And I said, are you making over or under this? And he goes, oh, I'm making over that. And when he said that, then, that's when my hair went up and just lit on flame. But yeah, and I was like, oh, well, just so you know, your female coworkers who are, stellar performers, we're making X. And his face, I'll just never forget his face. His face was like, oh.
Yeah, based on her over-under question, he was making at least $20,000 more than her, even though they both had the same job background, same master's degree, and had been with the company for the same amount of time.
there's just there's no logic to that. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing to rationalize about that. It's just wrong.
This is the point in the story where I'd find the closest bathroom and cry in a stall, but not Caitlin.
I'm not an angry person, but when I get angry, I get super angry. And it's like very contained, like Korean rage, like I will burn everyone who tries to get in my way. It's to the point that I really feel like if someone had like rubbed up against me, like the sheer friction of it, I would have just like lit on fire in the moment.
So she goes on a walk to calm down. She couldn't believe just how much her company had been undervaluing her.
And I thought, you know what? I could grow more and get paid more if I just left right now, because I can't work that angry.
So you decided on that walk pretty much that you were going to leave.
Oh, absolutely.
And Caitlin says she loved her job, but she compares it to a bad boyfriend. No one is ever like, he doesn't respect you, but he's funny and cute, so stay with him. They're like, no, he doesn't respect you, leave him. And on top of that, she was dealing with $120,000 of student debt that just felt impossible to pay off.
That's when I realized, like, I'm just gonna get paid. We're gonna shift into Caitlin gets paid mode.
Okay, but to make more money, first, Caitlin needed more data. So she logged on to LinkedIn.
And I just started blasting people, you know,
people you don't know.
Or whatever. People I don't know. No, people I totally don't know.
She started messaging people who had similar backgrounds and positions as her in user research, most of them white men. And she essentially asked the same question she asked her colleague. Are you making over or under this amount?
And how many people got back to you?
Oh, it was 3.
So not as big of a data set as she was hoping for, but it was something. And all 3 people reported back that they were making about the same as what her male coworker was making, a comfortable 6-figure salary. So now she knew for sure. She had been lowballing herself.
I was in an echelon of salary potential that I had no idea was even possible.
And at that time, Caitlin was applying to new jobs left and right, mostly with large tech companies. And in less than a month, she had gotten 4 job offers. 4.
When that was happening, I was like, Caitlin, you're the woman. I'm like, yes, like I just totally had like that moment. It was very much like, we've done all the things we said we were gonna do and it's working. Oh my God, it's working.
I don't know about you all, but I cannot imagine getting 4 job offers in a month. Caitlin says user experience positions are typically in high demand, but clearly she has a damn good resume. The company that she was leaning towards the most was Etsy. She remembers when she got on the phone with one of their HR reps to negotiate her position. She had decided that she was not going to ask as much as those guys on LinkedIn were telling her they made. She was going to ask for more.
When I offered the number, the recruiter just goes, oh, I'm going to have to review this. This was a little bit higher than what we were expecting. And I was like, yeah, this is the minimum I'm going to come in for. And then he went and did his little, HR dance back wherever they do their little HR dances.
Like, were there ever moments where you doubted yourself, or you were nervous you were going to come off as greedy, or?
Oh yeah, I was definitely feeling a lot of feelings about, oh my God, who am I to ask for this? But on the other hand, I felt if I don't do this negotiation now this way, like the right way, then that's only on me. And then, oh, Caitlin, what's wrong with you? Like, come on. This is so basic for men.
Caitlin and the HR guy go back and forth a couple rounds. He says he's not able to match the salary she wants. So then Caitlin brings up that her other job offers are able to match her desired salary.
And he was like, okay, let me see what I can do. And he came back and he said, well, okay, we're willing to offer you X, and I'm going to tell you that you're making more than X, Y, and Z people. And I'm like, okay, can you do better? And he just goes, and that's when he told me, I can guarantee you are maxing out everything.
She took the job.
What was the percentage difference from your previous salary to what they were offering?
It was a 41% jump.
That's crazy.
Oh yeah.
What?
It's life-changing money.
Whew. Caitlin says she's not trying to broadcast her salary, but it is safe to say it is in the 6 figures. She knows she's in a really fortunate position. Her industry is pretty lucrative, but she says her experience, it can be useful to a lot of people outside of tech, because what she's basically talking about is advocating for yourself. Before she launched into this whole pay transparency mission, she didn't understand her worth or even what was fair. And she feels really strongly about helping other women and people of color to know what they should negotiate. She even shares her salary with her junior coworkers. Because by not negotiating, Caitlin tells them, you are holding yourselves back. So basically to everyone in this room, get that money. All right, next up on stage, I'm gonna be joined by someone who is typically on the other side of the equation when it comes to negotiations. In fact, I have negotiated with her myself because she signs my paycheck every 2 weeks. Please welcome to the stage my boss, Satara Nieves. Hey, Satara.
Hey, Rima.
This isn't awkward.
It's a little awkward.
So I wanted to sit down with you because I really wanted to be able to pick your brain about what it's like to be in your position. And as I mentioned, we have negotiated before.
We have.
Do you remember when we negotiated?
I remember some of it. You probably remember it better than me.
Yeah, I remember just like, I had like all this like pent up energy. Like I had consulted literally I guess I've never told you this, but
You
like
have not.
I like consulted all of my friends and consulted people in the industry. And I remember people told me to like ask for a certain number that was like higher than I like felt comfortable doing. And so like I was just like this nervous, like I just was this nervous ball of energy. And could you tell? Honestly.
I don't know if I could tell. I
Yeah.
remember you actually doing more of it over email.
Oh, maybe I did. I think I confirmed because someone told me like put it in writing. So I was like, okay, that's what I'll do. But that's so funny because I remember like feeling like I was gonna approach it almost like, or I sensed that there was gonna be some tension, or I was like, okay, I need to like be ready. But it was actually like very matter of fact, which I wasn't expecting.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that how you typically try to approach negotiations?
Well, yeah, I guess we have actually never talked about this because Rima didn't tell me what any of these questions were going to be ahead of time, by the way. But I feel like every negotiation is a way for me as a boss person to start a relationship or to continue a relationship with somebody that I work with and value. And so I don't approach it as, like, I don't approach it in a nervous way, even though you're probably not alone in feeling.
Wait, do you feel nervous?
I don't feel nervous when I'm in my seat. I feel nervous when I'm negotiating for myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't remember you being nervous, but I remember you being very clear about what you wanted.
Yeah, yeah. What is like the biggest mistake people usually make when they approach you to negotiate? I'm so curious.
I guess there's maybe a couple of things. So the first one is when people don't negotiate, which is
that happens.
That happens, especially when people are young or early in their career. I've actually told people when I've offered them a job before, and they've said, "Oh my God, yeah, that sounds great. I'm like would really love that job." I've actually been like, "So you should actually say that you want to think about this, and then come back to me with another number, because I'm totally lowballing you right now, and I'm expecting you to negotiate."
Wait, seriously, you'll say that? That's so interesting.
Because I think when you're like first in you are like really want that first job. I remember really wanting my first job, and I think that's actually what I did, is just accept whatever the first thing somebody gave me was, because I was like, oh my God, I have a job. This is like, this is the thing. Yeah. So that's negotiate is the first mistake for negotiating is not negotiating.
Yeah.
And then I guess depending on where you are and what kind of company you're entering into, like there's obviously a huge range of what kind of salary places can offer. We work in public media. That's a really different level of salary than working for like a big VC-funded company. But there's a bunch of other things that you can and should ask for depending on what the company is. So that can be anything from like asking for more vacation time or professional development
Yeah.
or a whole range of things that you should also ask for money. Don't get me wrong, you should ask for more money.
And so when
but-
people ask for money, do they typically, how often will they give you a range and how often will they be like, this is the number that I want?
Oh, interesting.
Which one
it's
is better?
kind of all over the place
Yeah.
how people approach it. I would say that offering a range is essentially asking your employer to go for the lower part of that range. And so I would encourage people to go for a number that is higher than they think is reasonable, as
Yeah.
you just said that you did, which is interesting to hear. But asking for a range, I think, depending on who the employer is, your range may be under what they were thinking about paying you or expecting you to want.
Then why even like do this dance? Like, you know what I mean? It's so funny that it's sort of the expectation that you would have to go back and forth, you know?
I know.
I don't know if you have any. Well,
There's so much of this in work that is like that, right? Like, why do we do this dance?
Yeah, and it's just like part of the culture. It's funny, I actually had a former boss who said something similar to me, that they'll offer a salary and then they'll take it and he'll be like, actually, like we're supposed to do this back and forth.
Right.
Yeah, so, and so do people typically ask for, so it sounds like people typically ask for maybe too little or too much, actually?
It's a little, it depends.
Yeah.
Sometimes, especially if people ask around what other people are being paid, both inside the organization and outside of the organization, as everybody should. But sometimes when you're getting salary, like what other people are making in other organizations, it's not necessarily apples to apples. So I think that's just something to know. And I think it really kind of is all over the place, but
Yeah.
I think for any negotiation, coming in high is always better than coming in low.
Right.
And asking as many people as you can so that you know what that number should be is really important. And then when you actually are in front of a boss person talking about salary, you know, how that person reacts is going to be really telling to you. Like, you're not always going to get a yes, right? Like, I would love to pay everybody on my team like
much?
all the money, but I am limited by internal equity, and which is really important to me.
What is that?
and-
Okay.
What is what?
Or keep going.
So internal equity and what my budget is, and you know, all of the things. So, but you know, having a good sense of what is out there is super important.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's interesting that you say that, because a sentiment that I hear a lot from like my friends is just, and I felt this before too, which is like, oh, I don't want to ask for too much because I don't want to come off as greedy, or I don't want to upset my boss. Have you ever felt annoyed or upset by someone asking for too much?
No.
No.
I mean, I guess the thing I was going to say before is that, like, when you sit down with the person who's deciding your fate or offering you salary, it's really a good way for both of you. Like, you are giving each other feedback and perhaps not agreeing on something, and like trying to work it out so you're both happy.
So you like approach it as like more of a collaborative, sounds like.
Ideally, yeah.
ideally.
But I've also had bosses who I've gone to in the past, where like it was really telling how they responded to me trying to get more of what I thought I deserved, and like sort of like we heard in the tape, like that idea of an abusive relationship, like when somebody's telling you who they are in a negotiation also, even if you don't get what you want, the way that they proceed and like whether you trust them and all of those other things they're really part of it too.
Right. And so you said you get nervous sometimes when you approach a negotiation. Do you write a script ever? Or do you rehearse?
I rehearse.
Yeah.
For myself, not for if I'm asking for something for myself, I rehearse.
Yeah.
Because I'm super worried I'm gonna like just fuck it up and get it wrong. And I also, you know, I actually, whether you write it down or whether you practice it the mirror or to a friend. I think it is good to know what you want to say about your own value, and then also know what you might say depending on a range of things that your boss might come back to you with. So whether that's a much lower salary offer or anything, just like
be ready to counter.
If she offers me this amount of money, what will I say?
Yeah.
Or if, whatever the range of things that depend on what your situation is.
And is it totally appropriate just to be like, I need to think about that. I'm going to get back to you.
You should always
do that?
You should always do that, yeah.
Even if you're happy with it.
Even if you're happy with it, you should always do it. And I think there's also, if you get an offer that you're happy with, there's always an opportunity to think about what else you can add on to that.
Yeah.
That may be, again, that might be money, that might be professional development, that could be a bunch of things. But always think about it, and then come back the next day or in 2 days.
Yeah.
Talk to your friends and your loved ones.
Something I'm curious to ask you about is body language, and I feel like as soon as I say that, everyone's going to be looking at our body language. But we've talked about this before because you have taught me, or you've told me to maybe channel power poses during interviews for the podcast. So sort of sitting up straight, sort of having your feet locked in the ground. And I'm curious if you ever think about body language during a negotiation from either perspective. Have you?
Interesting. So I have thought about it more in, I think about my own body language the most when I'm facing a difficult conversation. So that can be a negotiation or just something that I think is going to involve conflict. And some of it is really just leaning forward.
Now I
And
feel
it's
like
hard to do with this mic in a way, but I don't know that that's the best. I don't know if that's the best pose to take right away in a negotiation, because it's a little aggressive.
Yeah. Show us your poses, Sarah.
I think whether it's power poses or just being aware of your body language, I think is good, because it also gives you some power over how you're being perceived, at least thinking about it. And you probably don't want to think about it too much during the negotiation, because you don't want to be so self-aware. You want to actually focus on the things.
Yeah,
you
now I
wanna
feel
focus on.
self-aware of my body language. Okay, what are some questions that people should be asking you, their boss, that maybe they're not asking during a negotiation?
Their boss or potential boss?
Or potential boss.
I think
maybe that's not money related.
Yeah, well, on the money-related
Okay.
piece, I think it is good to ask how salaries are, how salary recommendations are figured out at the place where you are. And then I do think it is worth asking around or thinking about the things that, so money's always important, but the other things that are important to you. And yeah, that can be I want to go to work it. Will you pay for it? Or I want to be able to shadow this person who's a job that's really cool, and actually start getting that stuff in writing, depending on what it is.
Is there something outlandish that someone's asked you that maybe you didn't expect that's just very specific?
I don't know if this is outlandish. I mean,
Yeah.
I've gotten asked about could somebody get their, take Uber to work and get that paid? I haven't had anything super outlandish. I would love something outlandish.
And can you, I would love to hear from your perspective a time that you negotiated and how that went.
Oh, okay. So I'll tell you the worst negotiation I ever had, which is when I was earlier in my career, I was advocating for myself to get a promotion, and my boss was dragging his heels and dragging his heels and dragging his heels, and then finally he brought me into his office and he was like, "You have great news, Sitara. I'm promoting you." And I was like, "Oh, that's great. I'm really happy to hear that." And he was like, this is the salary, which was like very little above what I was making with much more responsibility.
Oh, God.
And I was like, well, I'd like to think about it. And he said, I need to announce this in 20 minutes. And if you, you can say no, but if you say no, we're not going to move forward with it.
That's just unfair.
It was awful. It was awful. And if I could do it again, which I spent like the next 6 months going into my, through my brain.
Right.
I would have just been like, but I actually needed I actually really wanted the promotion and I felt like I deserved it and I didn't really want it. I didn't have any other options. So,
right.
But I replayed that over and over and over again in my head about how I could have done that differently. I really blamed myself for it, which in retrospect
was not fair.
Is not really fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it also made me really really conscious of negotiating in all of my future things. And the times that the next couple times I did dial a white guy for advice on how I should actually negotiate. So I had two.
I love that.
Well, it's the what would a white guy do conversation that everyone should have in their heads.
Just have it on speed dial.
So I actually dialed Matt Lieber, who, when he just graduated from business school, to help me negotiate. And he actually was like, this is what I would do. And it was a much higher number than I would have ever asked for. And I did not get that number, but I asked for it. And that was that was helpful. And also helped me think about some of the other things I should ask for.
Right, right. I think it's easier for someone else to assign a value to you almost. Do you know what I mean?
Completely.
That's a great story.
In many things in life, yeah.
And so any final words of advice for anyone negotiating? I feel like you gave us a lot of tips.
No, I mean, I think think about what your value is, ask other people to think about what your value is, and then ask for more than that. And you won't always get it for good reasons sometimes, but sometimes you will. And everyone here should get what they deserve and what they value.
Great. Thank you so much, Satara.
Thank you.
Now I feel ready to negotiate.
Uh-oh.
Next time I negotiate. All right. Now we're going to bring out our next guests, Julia Furlan and Keisha TK Dutess. But first, another round of applause for Satara, y'all. Thank you. All right, I just want to keep that song playing.
I mean, truly.
So for our final segment for today's show, we're going to do something that we call the group chat, where we bring on some friends of the podcast to answer some pressing questions from our audience when it comes to money and work. So kind of like the questions you'd ask your own group chat. So here with me on stage is Julia Furlan. She is a host and reporter at NPR. You may have heard her stepping in for Sam Sanders on It's Been a Minute or telling you how to make friends as adults for NPR's podcast Life Kit. Also, Keisha TK Dutess, she co-hosted TK in the AM, which is on hiatus after 1,000 episodes. And she is a producer at Glitch and is the executive producer consultant for Here to Slay, which is amazing. Y'all are amazing, badass women. So basically, before this conference, we sent out a survey to ask you all if you had any questions about money and work stuff. And so we're gonna go through some of them right now and see what advice we can give.
Ooh, I'm ready.
Y'all ready?
Yeah, no, I'm extremely ready.
Okay, I think this will be fun.
Ready.
Okay, oh wow, it's a huge screen. So our first question, someone wrote in saying, I really don't, I hate my boss. I really don't like the way my boss operates. I don't like how he treats people, and I'm really bad at hiding that. I'm worried that I can't stay at this company because I can't deal with my boss, but I don't want to give up a good job. How do I deal with a shitty boss?
Whew, that was really hard. I have a big face, and I have trouble hiding how I feel in certain situations, so I really empathize with this person. And having a boss who you really just like really don't enjoy spending time with is unfortunate because you spend so much time with your boss. I would say that there's like two things that you should do. And one of them is like deal with the situation that you have in front of you, which is like learn to bring your best self, even if you hate it, and even if it's really hard for you. Learning how to sort of take feedback and give feedback is ultimately part of any job that you're gonna ever have to do, and it's not super fun, but it's very valuable. It's a very valuable skill to be able to sort of like bring your best self even when it's difficult. And then the other one is try and find another job that you like better, because that there are jobs. I think that oftentimes people feel like, I feel like I might say this more than once, but like people feel like their job that sucks is the only thing in front of them. And they feel like dedicated to working and like fixing the solution. I mean, I think a lot of us are producers. We have this like very strong instinct to produce for the solution to the problem. And sometimes sometimes you just gotta say goodbye to a certain job. Nothing is better for that than getting laid off, which happened to me and will happen to most of us.
Listen,
so, your job is a job.
Okay, so you have a big face. I too suffer from big facedness. And sometimes that shows on, first of all, basically what I'm gonna say is turn off the, when you're doing the video chats, turn the video off.
Oh my God.
First of all. I got caught out there about a month ago. Sometimes it's the boss and sometimes it's just how they manage, right? And it's the shenanigans of the job and you're like over it. So someone said a thing.
Wait, and now I want to
and
hear
I
the
was
story.
over it and I was on the video camera being over it. I was like, oh. This was like a month ago, y'all.
Oh no. You gotta be like, I'm going through a tunnel. I don't know, the call dropped, the signal dropped.
Did they notice?
They did notice. And also I was in a room with humans. So the people in the room noticed. But when you are like, when the job knows that they're effing up, when they know, they almost are, they can't flag you on that, right? Like my reaction was a natural reaction and I should have conducted myself better, but also they couldn't even say anything else to me because they were just running a circus at that point.
Right. They knew that you had a right to be frustrated.
And they knew it. They knew it. So I'm saying turn the video off. But also, then I had to go back, and I thought about it a lot. I was like, okay.
Do you address this?
I didn't address it with them, forget them. I'm fine. Look at me, I'm still working. But I thought about it with myself, and I was like, okay, am I bringing my A game? Am I bringing my best self? What is it about that moment that irked me? What is it about that person that said it that bothered me? How can I fix it for myself? Forget about how can I fix it for them, because a hierarchy is going to work how it's designed to work, and it's not designed to help me be efficient, right? So how can I be efficient in this hierarchy? So I had to fix my face. So now on those cams, I turned the cams off. Also in the room, I'm trying to be chill. I'm just like, you know what? Let it go. Because this thing that they're talking about, while it affects me and what I'm trying to bring to this company, it is also not worth this.
Right, because then that just distracts you more. It's like you're not trying to,
There's also like something that you just said I think is important to highlight, which is that like sometimes in the moment you feel panicked and you feel like you're going to have to address it right now, or you feel like you want to be your authentic self, like you would at home with your friends or whatever. There is a lot to be said for sort of processing something not in that moment and then bringing a tighter, more researched, and sort of like smarter story later on. There is something to be said. It doesn't mean that you lose if you just come back with a different kind of feedback.
Well, also you can like try to be constructive about it too, right? Like you can approach your boss and be like, hey, like I just want to be clear. Like what are your preferences on communicating? Like what do you need? This is what I need. This is what I need to be supported. And so that way at least you can like reset the expectations and like communicate, as opposed to just like
pushing, you know?
I've definitely circled back. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, the thing that the thing that was said in the meeting, that wasn't accurate. Actually, here's all the accurate things. So, and then they're like, oh, okay, cool. You know, like,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
As long as I hear cool, I'm good. Like,
I also feel like there's like one more thing that you can do, which is like when you walk into a room with somebody that you feel bad with, taking a minute before you walk into that room and walking in and like taking a deep breath and sort of like centering yourself in your body and being like really strong. Sometimes you listen to a song or something where you just basically like walk into the room with intention, with the like wholeness of yourself, and there you will feel more powerful, even if you aren't.
That's great advice.
Though I hope you are and become more powerful. May us all.
All right,
May
that's great
we all.
advice. All right, next question, y'all. So someone wrote in asking, how do you tell people what your rates are and feel confident asking for what you deserve? So going back to what you just said. And this is also like in theme with like our show, right? With the salary negotiations, but more in the context of maybe freelancers. So yeah, how do you do that?
oh, okay. So this one is tricky.
You freelance.
Yeah, freelance. And even when you're looking and you're trying to get that salary right, first I ask other people. Every time that I go up a step, I ask new people in that step, in that level, like, okay, what are you getting? What are you getting? What is the white guy getting? What is the white woman getting? What are my black sisters getting? What are every level, I'm looking. Like last year, I was here at Werk in New York, though, up for a job, and they gave me this number that I didn't feel comfortable with, but I had not reached the level to know if this was a real legit number, right? I called Julia, I called a bunch of people. I went on Twitter and I said, hey y'all, I'm having trouble figuring out this rate.
Yeah.
I'm at Werk right now. Let me know if y'all want to talk about this title and this rate. Several people replied and was like, I'm at the bar, let's talk about it. And I had like 10 women around me saying, I'm from Texas, this is what we get here. I'm from New York, this is what we get here. And knowing and seeing that made me realize, and then I was like, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? And then what I realized is the job and the money they were trying to give me was not worth the trouble. So when I'm asking for my rate, I first I do that research.
Yeah, and it's like what you're talking about is really networking too, which is like we always like sort of roll our eyes at as this like obnoxious, annoying thing we have to do. But I feel like there are ways to approach it and be like more action oriented, right?
I also think that like as media companies like disappear and our industry grows and shrinks like a petri dish thing, I think that we have a moral and sort of like professional obligation to each other to be honest and to sort of within reason be open to each other's struggles and sort of like share the things. I don't think that I've been cut down by sharing the things that are difficult or the things that I want for my colleagues. And I feel like as people grow in their careers and eventually are laid off or switch jobs or whatever, there is an amount that you gain a lot more from being generous than you do from being miserly. So that would be and networking, what TK was talking about, like do your research. If you show up and you have not done your research, then you may be leaving money on the table that you don't even know about.
Yeah.
And like, if you have people that you can reach out to, I feel like we should be more open with our salaries with each other, with people that we trust. You know?
And when you get to the number that you feel comfortable with, low key, put a little more on it, right? Think about the incidentals of your life, right? You gotta go to urgent care. You might not have benefits or whatever. Think about that number. Also, taxes if you're freelance. The government says you have to pay them, but whatever. I mean,
Okay,
but if you decide to, think about that, negative 30% right there. So that number you're comfortable with, add a little more and say it with your chest. Put that on paper and send it. And send it and send it.
I love it.
Yeah.
Right, because also if you're not charging enough or not asking for enough, like you're not only hurting yourself, but you're undercutting other folks in the industry, right? Because it's like you're not raising the bar, you're lowering it.
And the company doesn't have an incentive to try and pay
They're not
you
going to
more.
do it. They're not going to do it. So it's, I think it's on us to talk more and create a new and fair standard.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Great. We can move on to the next question unless y'all have more advice.
Let's do it.
All right, so question number 3. I have a coworker who is routinely late in completing tasks. Everyone is aware, and I have complained to leadership. Our entire team changes due dates to leave for 2 extra days to be late and make the overall deadline. Our VP has suggested I speak with her directly when she's late to let her know she hurts my workload. But as the only Black woman on a team of creatives, I do not want to reprimand her at all. That is not my job. There have been several general meeting announcements about responding to emails and submitting on time. How do I keep my shit on time and popping when I have to depend on her? Fire her, someone says.
Yeah. That was my first instinct.
Really?
Like, how does this person have a job still?
Yeah.
And then that hit home for me, you know, as a Black woman, that it's this weird thing, like people, it's, okay, so we're living in this world, everybody's like open and talking and it's great, and I do want an open and like receptive boss, but if you don't recognize that you have a job to do as my boss, to regulate the team, to make sure that we are all supported, to step in when shit is getting hit in the fan, this shit is clearly hitting the fan. You know, I as a Black woman know my role in history as the fixer, as the mammy, as the person. So how dare you as a boss, VP, whoever the fuck you are, ask me to police my coworker? That's not on me. So what I do is make sure my shit is on time, right? And if the buck stops at this lady, then the whole project stops, right? The whole team doesn't stop for this person. But if she is putting a wrench in the team's works, then she's got to go. But also, I'm not gonna fire her.
Right. Well, so okay, what if she can't leave, right? Like at the heart of the question too is like, how do you deal with a coworker who's just like not submitting their stuff, who's not pulling their weight, right?
I name check them. Yeah. Hi, blah, blah, blah. Jane is not sending her assets. I cannot continue until Jane sends her assets. Send.
In writing.
In writing. Yep.
I think that there's some power to that. It seems like also that, I mean, clearly, as many companies have, there's a management problem. And it seems like the VP is putting it on these like sort of like generalized group emails that are like, hey, everybody be on time. I'm cool.
No big deal.
And like, that is so unhelpful. Like the exchange for your power as a VP, like you have all this fucking power, you should do your job like everybody else is. And one of those things is delivering not so great messages. You know, like people have a fear of conflict and a fear of direct conversation, including me. I like really hate that. But like when that is what you have to do, you know, it's the VP's job or the manager, whoever's managing this person needs to do a better job of managing them. And I 100% one up what TK said about just like, it's not your job as the only Black woman on a team of creatives to suddenly like manage this person who is fucking things up for everybody.
And in that moment, I'm always thinking because this has definitely come up in my life. I'm thinking, if you wanted me to do that, then I should lead this team.
To give me more money, give me a better title.
Like, why are we even out here? You know?
Right.
You should lead all the teams.
I don't know, I'm trying.
You're so good.
You're so good
One
too.
day. I love that.
She was my boss.
I was her boss.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That
Amazing.
was not great. Sorry.
I'm sure you were.
Keep going.
Well, so it reminds me of I work with someone where they do like almost health checks for their team. So they'll be like, okay, how's everyone feeling? Are you like in green, yellow, or red? And so it's like if someone's in the yellow and the red, if you're like not turning things on time or whatever, then that becomes like a collective problem, right? It's like, okay, so the team right now is in yellow and red.
And these are done like with a group?
Yeah, from what I understand. But like, I guess the general idea though is like, you know, if your manager is just not there, I mean, well, not in this case, but like if you don't feel comfortable approaching your manager or like aren't confrontational, there is a way maybe to do it as like a more collective thing of like, instead of using like, use statements being like, hey, I feel like we're in this, like, I feel like we're gonna be late if we don't turn this in. So like, what do you think we can do?
Yeah.
Which again, it does like, at that point you are managing a little, which is like not fair. But like, if you have to be constructive about it, I think is one way to go about it.
I think that advocating for more communication is something that you could
Yeah.
also do in this situation, in which like clearly like these like big emails are not working. If you had a morning stand-up where everybody's like going around and talking about the things that they need or their deadlines.
More accountability, yeah.
Like dividing the conflict up along, spreading it along 5 days can sometimes take the sort of like big conversation, we have to do this, blah, 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 sort of like take a little bit of the tension out of it. I don't know.
And you're in person, you got the body language, and then like, you know, if I am missing something, you know, Julia can say, well, I'm just waiting for these assets from TK. We'll link up later. You know, like in person, better than an email, and I'm, you know, like typing in caps at you. That's
right.
So
You never did that.
Because I ain't have to, right? Exactly.
Great. Is there any other advice y'all want to give for this?
I don't know.
Yeah. I think that's helpful.
I feel bad for this person. My heart goes out to her.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I would say for her to talk to the, don't just talk to the boss, but talk to the whole team, like you said, like together, and make it everybody's responsibility to check in on each other, because like that's the only way. And when you see somebody being the only one like addressing a problem, step in as a coworker and be like, okay, I see you're the one that's flagging this all the time. Can I help you with that?
And also having empathy for the person who's the only one, who in this case is the only Black woman on the team. And like, I would like call upon all of the other people on the team to step in as much as they can to uplift and sort of support the work of this person.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't take into consideration, and we were talking about that this morning, cultural aspects of dealing with employees and coworkers. Like, where did we come from literally, right? Where does the culture come from? And the culture of being a Black woman in the workplace is, like I said, being a fixer, being a person that is always gonna like make sure shit gets done. And honestly, now in 2019, we're realizing we can just sit back and do our jobs.
Right.
And that's what I'm out here doing.
Right, good. Do your job.
Yes.
I love it. All right, so our last question. So a common theme that we heard from folks is just, love this, fighting with men to get credit.
Oh my God.
So, someone wrote us and said, one person, they said, sorry, how do you deal with male coworkers who ask to work on your projects last minute after the majority of the work is done without sounding angry or ungrateful in front of your boss?
Oh.
Yeah.
A collective groan. Anyone else?
Have y'all?
You want to start?
Yeah.
All right, let's
go for it.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, the feeling angry and ungrateful part in front of my boss thing, that kind of like weirds me out, right? Because we're at work. You pay me money, I do my job. I don't worry about my anger or my gratefulness. I don't feel grateful for something. I'm giving you my time and you're giving me money.
There's a really good line from Mad Men, which is, that's what the money is for.
Exactly.
I love that.
And then the dude that's taking credit, right?
Yeah.
Or he wants to show up at the...
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
he's like coming, from what I can tell, like the guy is like coming in last minute, the project's almost done, and being like, so my work has been, I want to work with you, I love working with you. Probably like I sense like a little flavor of like coming in at the last minute and like kissing ass and then trying to get the name on the group project that's going to get an A.
Like a boss doesn't know all the time, like who did what. So it's like easy just to be like, okay, yeah.
I mean, if I have nothing that's outstanding, then I have nothing for you, right? Okay, hey, Jared. I don't know why. I named him Jared. Because that behavior felt like Jared behavior,
feels right.
Yeah. I'm like, hey, Jared, I'm good. We're all lined up on this, thanks. But if I do have something outstanding, it's usually some grunt work or some BS or something that I don't have the skills for, and it's just not done. So guess who's doing it? Jared. Jared. Give Jared that to do. I mean,
Go for it.
I will say one thing that is like, it's not for Jared, it's for everyone. I just think that being aggressively generous about credit is really important. So like, let's say that the project is like almost done, finding ways to sort of acknowledge the work that has been done by every layer of every team in every communication that you make is being clear about that as much as possible is gonna make it harder for Jared to come in at the end and be like, and then, I went to a meeting. And it's like, Jared, you didn't do anything in that meeting.
Jared, get out of here.
A lot of us like,
J bro.
J bro. A lot of us work on Slack, so like you can do that, right? You can give the big presentation where no one gets credit, where it's the whole team.
Yeah.
And then you go in Slack, which, haha, I've been there, I've done that. Okay, thank you, Cindy, for graphics. Thank you, Jared, for the bullshit. Thank you, you know what I'm saying? Like, then everybody knows what time it is. And hopefully, the VP is on that day leading.
But there's also another part of this question. Do you have a thing to say? Am I
No,
doing-
please. Y'all have more interesting things to say. Please say it.
Is there like the part of this question that is like, am I going to seem like a jerk if I stand up for myself? And the possibility is that you might seem like people might perceive you as a jerk, and that is stupid and really irritating.
Yeah.
But it's sometimes it's the cost of standing up for yourself is saying like, I don't think that it's a good look for you in your business situation to say like, actually, Jared didn't do anything.
Right.
Yeah.
I do think that there are very graceful and sort of like petty ways to do it.
Passive aggressive.
Like you can just like slide in the credit for everybody and then leave Jared out. And or you could just say like, Jared, you really gave us some moral support or something like really like gold star for you.
Turn negative speak into positive speak, but also in alignment with the project.
Yeah, and I mean, it depends on your workplace whether or not you're going to be perceived as a jerk. It depends on what people think of. So, like, I don't know how the team works, but like, I think that being aggressive about credit, especially for people with less power than you, like as you go up the hierarchy, it is so much more important as you move up to credit the people who have contributed to the work that you have presented, and giving them that is like vital.
Yeah, and I feel like, right. And you also have to do it for yourself too, right? Like, I think it can come across as like boastful, but like, hey, look at me. But like, at the end of the day, if your boss doesn't know that you did something, like that's tied to promotions, that's tied to like assignments, that's tied to raises. So it's like, to a certain extent, like you do have to like be able to rep yourself, even if it's uncomfortable or if it feels weird.
And it is most of the time uncomfortable.
Yeah, like no one wants to do that. Like, but I think it's funny. It reminds me of a story. Someone I know like wanted to get credit on an assignment, but they felt really weird about like making it vocal or like making it well known. And so she asked like one of her colleagues, like, hey, like I just want to make it clear that like I'm sort of the authority on this. Do you mind in the next meeting just like asking me questions so it solidifies in people's mind that like I'm the go-to person for this, which is like one way to do it.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
Sort of like a plant.
Yeah. Yo, you have to set yourself up to look good. Like you are sometimes the expert at the thing, right? But also people, because of the bodies we come in or because of whatever, don't believe that, right?
Yeah.
So you get a coworker that's like your good, like the person you tell your secrets to, the person that knows where the bodies are buried corporate-wise.
Corporate bodies.
In which folder it's in. You get that person to do that, like to amplify you.
Yeah, exactly.
If we walk into rooms and don't amplify each other, then we are doing each other a huge disservice.
Right, and the more we amplify each other, like, the more likely, you just create that culture, you know what I mean? So that you do also get credit for things, and it's not.
I think there's also like, Jared wants to be your ally, like there is a point at which like people really talk about allyship as this like thing that they like aspire to do, but it's hard. There's like no map for really doing it. And in some ways, like being direct and saying like, hey, in this meeting, can you, I need you to like ask me a couple of questions about this and sort of uplift me in this particular way. That could be a way of making Jared into some sort of like ally into the thing. Yeah. But Jared seems like he's not
trust. Interested in that.
There are some people that you can't trust.
And I just want to speak to the seeming like a jerk thing. So like there's seeming like a jerk and then there's being a jerk. right? Like standing up for yourself, never think that that's some jerky behavior. That's just literally that person is the jerk, right? If they're making you stand up for yourself, that person is the jerk. They're being a jerk. You are a person that's just they're just trying to live.
Right, exactly.
You're a good person, don't worry.
Yeah.
All of y'all are great people.
Yeah, fighting for credit is really hard though, and I think that like being slighted by not getting enough credit can be very, very painful. And I think we all probably know what it's like to watch somebody take credit for your work, and it just feels terrible.
Yeah.
And that sucks, and I'm sorry.
Yeah. That's great advice.
Thanks.
Yeah. I think that's all we have for the show.
You know what you have?
What?
Credits.
Yes, we have credits. That's a great transition. Thank you. Well, first, let me thank Julia and TK. Y'all were so great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is fun. I love having opinions. Do we leave now?
You can stay on stage.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So that's all for the show. In terms of credits, the show was produced by Megan Dietrich. Woo! Haley Hirschman. Woo! Eliza Mills. And Muna Danish. Thank you all. Y'all are such a great audience. Thank you so much for our first live show.
So good. So good. Thank you guys so much for that amazing live performance. Okay, it's lunchtime. I know it's lunchtime and everybody wants to leave, and I'm going to tell you very briefly food-related news. In your tote bag, on the program, it's the back panel, upper right-hand quadrant. You'll find recommendations for where to go and where to eat. There's fancy places and there's not fancy places. Yesterday, I went to Guisados and it was great. I would recommend the fish tacos. We will be starting back here at 2, and we're going to be talking about hiring. So if you're looking for a job, or if you want to hire somebody for a job, that's a particularly rad panel for you. I'm also going to note that the Mentor Meetup space, which is sponsored by ACAST, will be open for you to carry on conversations. That's downstairs beneath the theater, below the theater lobby. Also, if you sign up for one of those Ask an Engineer sessions, that program starts at 1, and it's in the Walker Eisen room on the 2nd floor at the Ace Hotel. Also, just to be nice to each other and to the people who are on stage, I think we should be using that room for conversations because it got hella loud, right? You could hear it through the curtains, right? Who knew? Now we know. Also, we'll see you at 2, all right? Thanks, guys. What a great morning. See you soon.